So this week we had something happen in Richmond, which does not typically happen in December. And what we had happen was
good bagels.
Oh, do you really? This is the energy you're going to bring to the show tonight.
Please take note of who's antagonizing, Casey.
Yes,
it's not
I
me.
am. You're still on my poo-poo list, but now it's both of you. Both of you are on my poo-poo list, aren't you?
I mean, how do I not try that?
Well played. Well played.
I'm the chief derailer in chief.
In any case, we had something very unusual happen. We got snow. And what is so funny to me, so I haven't lived in Connecticut. I'm sure I've made this speech before on the show, sometime in the last 10, 11 years, whatever. But I haven't lived in Connecticut since I graduated high school in 2000. Went to Virginia Tech for 4 years, briefly went back to Connecticut in the summertime for a couple of months while I was looking for work. And then I was down in Central Virginia, a different part of Central Virginia after that. So it's been 21 years that I've been in Virginia, far and away the longest I've ever lived anywhere. And I really do not miss the snow. I'm good not having snow anymore. And if Virginia, or at least Richmond, gets snow, typically that happens for whatever reason in like the January, February, maybe March timeframe. But it is very unusual to get it in December. But the thing that makes me laugh so much is that Richmond, for better and for worse, has approximately, let me do the math, zero ability to deal with snow. And so it was, I believe, Sunday night, and they were calling for, prepare yourselves, Northeasterners. They were calling for, I believe, 3 inches of snow. And by 4 p.m. on Sunday afternoon, they had already canceled school for one day. And intellectually, I get why that is, because as I said, we just don't have the plows and the salt and the whatever in order to deal with it. I mean, we have some, but not nearly to the level that, Massachusetts or New York has, or Connecticut. But as someone who spent his formative years in Connecticut, where my recollection, probably incorrect, but my recollection was we were under a foot of snow between October and April, it's so funny to me that there had not been a single snowflake coming out of the sky by 4 p.m. on Sunday, and they had already canceled school for Monday. And then they canceled school for Tuesday. And then today...
What? Wait a second. They canceled school for Tuesday on Sunday or on Monday?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. On Monday afternoon. I'm sorry. That was ambiguous of me. My apologies.
And what was happening on the ground Monday afternoon that they canceled school for Tuesday?
So they just hadn't been able to clear anything.
So it was the same 3 inches of snow?
Yeah, pretty much.
You get 2 days off from school? I think that's excessive. I understand you can't get rid of it. We're not going to have time to
No, I'm sorry.
the
My
roads.
timeline's wrong. Wait, my timeline's wrong. It was Friday and Monday. I'm sorry. My timeline is all wrong. I should have taken notes. So it was Friday. They got canceled. I think I have this right now. So they canceled Thursday into Friday. That was the first batch. And then we got more snow on Monday. That's what it was. We were going to get more snow on Monday. So they canceled Monday. So what is time? When the kids don't go to school, what is time? I don't know how you, John, I don't know how you keep track of what day to record because you have no kids there to keep you on track. But anyways, so yeah, it's just so funny to me, our inability to deal with snow, or if you believe these two jerks make bagels. But anyway, our inability to deal with snow, it will never stop being funny to me. And honestly, it is reasonable that they canceled school both of these days, but to do so before there was a flake of snow on the ground, it will never stop making me laugh. I just find it to be the funniest thing in the world.
Canceling when there's no snow on the ground is reasonable if there's going to be like 3 feet or something. It's going to be like a blizzard.
Right. That's the thing. No, 3 inches, John. 3 inches. I don't know what the metric conversion is.
But they don't have like plows and salt there. Like that's the reason why.
Exactly.
Like you, John, up there in the Arctic, you wouldn't cancel for 3. Like up there, it snows 3 inches. No one even mentions it because you're equipped for it. Everything is so commonly covered in snow up there that everyone the towns are prepared with plows and salt and everything. Everyone knows how to drive in the snow. And down in the South, in the deep South where Casey lives.
Yeah, right. In the deep South where I am. Mm-hmm.
No one there has ever seen snow before. It's like the way the British people have never realized they need air conditioning. Like even though like every summer it's obvious that everyone in Britain needs air conditioning, but they're like, oh, it's not usually like this. And then of course every summer they say it's not usually like this, and they obviously need air conditioning. Virginia, like it does snow sometimes, and so you do probably need like a plow or two in town. But
that's what I was saying. Like maybe you get the one day, but by that day being off, the one plow that you have should drive over all the roads that are important. You know what I mean?
Well, and I think part of the problem is in a lot of cases, it's not the main roads or even like the second tier roads. It's the neighborhood roads that are often either maybe not impassable, but not great.
Well, everyone in America has these gigantic SUVs now.
Also
even no matter where they live, I feel like, okay, so your local roads haven't been plowed. I think your giant, gnarly SUV with the big tires and 12 inches of ground clearance can make it over 3 inches of snow to get onto the highway.
No, it can't, because first of all, they don't have all the good tires and ground clearance. They're
Actually,
large.
that's very true.
They're large vehicles that have racing slicks and 25-inch rims.
I don't know if they have racing slicks, but okay.
They are also often most SUVs now. The most common trims sold are not off-road trims. They're lower to the ground, lower suspension, bigger wheels, smooth tires, and they're made to look pretty.
Are they more than 3 inches off the ground?
Sometimes not. But then and then also they are being piloted by people who not only have never driven in any kind of condition, but think that their SUV will allow them to drive however they would like in such conditions. Mm-hmm. And so it's a combination of, a lot of confidence in a vehicle that seems like it would be good, but might not be as good as you think. And that oftentimes results in problems.
That reminds me, I never gave my daughter her snow driving lesson because we just, the timing didn't line up. Like when my son was getting his license, there was a day when it snowed. I think school was canceled or something. And we raced over to the school parking lot, which was not plowed. And it just had a foot of snow in it, and did all sorts of snow shenanigans to learn how to drive in snow. But my daughter, we've had a very, fingers crossed, we've had very light snow here, where it would just be an inch or two, and then it just, sort of settles in, and then another inch or two. It's very, very light snow for the past several winters, not enough to go high school parking lot, skidding in the snow. And so I've never gotten a chance to do that with her. So maybe when she's home over the holidays, we'll have a chance to do that, but we'll see. That's the tricky thing about having plows. So you want to teach your kid how to drive in the snow? You have a very narrow window of time where you can get to an unplowed parking lot before the plows come and plow the parking lot.
No, it's so true. The only thing that this reminds me of, it's not apples to apples, but years ago, again, I'm sure I've told this story before, but years ago, many, many years ago, 10 plus years ago, I was doing a lot of work in the LA area. And there was one day that it was an evening, and we were catching a flight back east. I believe it was a red eye. And we were driving to LAX, and there was rain in Los Angeles. And it was, if I'm honest, it was a genuine rain. It wasn't just a little spittle. It was an honest to goodness rain. And if I wasn't there, I would not believe the words that are about to come out of my mouth. But I kid you not, people in Los Angeles don't understand what weather is. I think most of coastal California don't get what weather is. And so anyways, these cars were spinning off the road, pew, 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 left and right. And it was rain, just rain. But they never get weather. So they didn't know what to do. And it was scary, but also freaking hilarious because nobody understood what to do when the weather wasn't absolutely perfect. It was incredible. All right, let's do some follow-up. Speaking of the Los Angeles area, if I'm not mistaken, that's where this is all filmed. Apple Fitness Plus, and I would like to state for the record, I did not write this. I believe this was John. From our internal show notes, Apple Fitness Plus is doing better than the Mac Pro. Kind of wish I came up with that burn. Very well done, John. Very well done. And like I said, I believe that their studio is in Santa Monica. Anyway, there was an announcement a couple of days back that Apple Fitness Plus will be expanding to 28 new markets. Reading from the announcement, Apple today, which was December 8th, announced Apple Fitness Plus is expanding to 28 new markets on December 15th, with Japan launching early next year. As part of the service's latest expansion, since it was unveiled 5 years ago, hundreds of Fitness Plus workouts and meditations will be digitally dubbed with a generated voice in Spanish, German, and Japanese, with more dubbed episodes added every week. The dubbed workouts and meditations feature a generated voice based on the actual voice of each of the 28 Fitness Plus trainers. Fitness Plus is also introducing a new music genre to the service, K-pop. I thought that this was interesting for a few reasons. First of all, we just recently had an article, I think from Gurman, saying that basically Fitness Plus was circling the drain. I'm paraphrasing.
It was
heavily.
Under review.
There you go.
Seems like it got a pretty good review.
Yeah, and on that topic, and the reason I wrote that it's doing better than the Mac Pro, it might still be under review. This might be like an effort to get more, maybe we can get more customers because it's all in English. How do we deal with that? Oh, we'll use these AI dub voices, blah, 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 right? It still might be under review, but it's doing better than the Mac Pro because at least they're doing stuff with it.
Not that we're bitter. But anyways, so that this whole story is interesting in that regard. But I think the thing that's most interesting to me is the part in, as you just mentioned, John, the part about the voices. So let me read just that subsection one more time. The workouts and meditations will be digitally dubbed with a generated voice in Spanish, German, and Japanese with more dubbed episodes, blah, blah, blah. The generated voice based on the actual voice of each of the 28 Fitness Plus trainers. I think that's fascinating. And if I'm to base how this will go on Workout Buddy, which I don't know if you recall this, I think it was new this year. I don't think it was last year, but the idea is as you're doing a workout with your watch, there will be a workout buddy that will chime in periodically and say something along the lines of, great job in your outdoor walk. You've walked 340 million miles so far this year. You have 28 minutes left in your exercise ring. And now back to Metallica or whatever you're listening to. And the voice that I use is very clearly, if I'm not mistaken, it's Sam, which is one of the trainers on Fitness Plus. They don't name who it is, but that's pretty clear who it is. I'm pretty sure I have that right. But anyways, it's really good. And again, whatever, will even announce the music or whatever that you're listening to. I don't think it does anything for podcasts, but for music, when I'm using Apple Music anyway, it'll say now back to, Metallica or Goose or what have you. And it really is, it's clear that it's not a human, but as generated voices go, it's really, really, really good. So I presume and assume that they're using similar technology for Workout Buddy as they are for these dubbed episodes. But I just think that's super duper cool and a very fascinating approach.
Yeah, this is becoming more popular. There was actually a recent controversy in one of the video games that I'm playing now where the voice actors that voiced the lines of the various characters in the video game were, depending on who you asked, forced or railroaded into signing a contract that said you give us the right to essentially generate speech from your voice. Like same way I'm assuming these fitness trainers did. You work as a fitness trainer for Apple Plus, and part of their contract probably says we are allowed to synthesize your voice so that we can make you speak German even though you don't speak German or whatever, dub you in a different language. And people don't like that because people are mad about AI. And they're like, well, that was part of their contract. Those voice actors or those fitness trainers signed it. Or they're like, yeah, but they were forced into it because you can't get a job in this industry because they all make you sign away your rights to X, Y, and Z. So anyway, people are mad at the video game because the video game has lines of dialogue that are generated by AI trained on the actual voice actors' voices. So I don't know how this is going to turn out. It seems like another one of those things where if there have to be better contract negotiations, kind of like before the contracts dealt with streaming and everything like that, better contract negotiations to get a better deal that if you are going to sign away your AI voice rights, that you are fairly compensated for it in some way. So I wonder if the Fitness Plus trainers are kind of feeling the same way of hey, wait a second, did you just kind of replace me? Rather than paying me to read all those lines in German? And the second thing is, okay, so they trained it on your voice in English, but there are sounds in other languages that don't exist in English. So it's really interesting, for native speakers of language to say, does this sound right? Does this person speaking Korean sound correct? Or are there sounds that are Chinese, or are there sounds that sound weird because nothing in the training data included that sound?
Yeah. I don't know how that's going to work out, but I do think it's fascinating one way or the other. And if ATP listener, if you try one of these in a week or so when it comes out and you have feedback, please send me a toot on Mastodon or something. I'd be interested to hear what you think. Especially
if you speak a language, if you're listening to a dub in a language that has sounds that are not in English.
Or just if you're a native speaker of the language dubbed into, let us know, how good are these dubs? How does it sound natural? Can you tell it's AI generated? Or, how good does it sound, basically?
Right. One other quick piece on this. Later on, I hadn't read this part yet. There's a quote in reading from the announcement. Through its seamless integration across Apple devices, Fitness Plus has helped inspire users to live a healthier day, said Jay Blahnik, Apple's vice president of fitness technologies. I call this out. I think it's interesting that they're quoting Jay Blahnik. Not necessarily bad, but certainly interesting. Because if you recall, just a few months back, I think it was summertime or something like that, there was a big controversy where he was accused of Jay Blahnik, that is, was accused of really toxic workplace culture and mild to severe harassment and so on and so forth. And Apple seemed to just kind of want to sweep this under the rug. And I'm not here to pass judgment as to whether or not any of those accusations were true, but they usually are, from what I can tell. So anyways, I just thought it was interesting that they actually came out and quoted him specifically, a named quote in the newsroom announcement.
File this under the same thing as people getting a press release saying how wonderful they are when they get forced out of a company for not doing their job. If you're a high enough level executive and you do terrible things and everybody hates you, they will fly cover for you and allow you to continue to have a job and sweep that stuff under the carpet. And I agree with you, Casey. Usually when a story like that actually gets out into the public, it has to be so bad that we actually hear about it. There's plenty of bad managers doing bad things in positions where that doesn't get out to the public. When it does, it's really almost always like a where there's smoke, there's fire situation. So maybe a little bit more corporate dysfunction at the high levels of Apple.
We are sponsored this episode by Aura Frames. Now, we've all been there. We've all been kind of desperate for a gift at the last minute and just gotten somebody like a gift card or something. Skip the panic. Give somebody an Aura frame. It's so much more personal. When you're buying gifts for adults, like your parents, your grandparents, nobody wants more stuff. Everyone has enough stuff. You want personal, meaningful gifts, and Aura frames help you get that. They're really good digital picture frames, high-quality hardware, great-looking screens, and there's this great ecosystem around them. So here's what you do. You give a digital picture frame to, say, your parents, and you can have it show pictures of your family, like your kids, your dog, whatever you want to do, in your parents' house on this picture frame. And it's unlimited free photos and video hosting. You just download the Aura app, you connect it to Wi-Fi, and you can add photos anywhere, anytime. So the second you take a great photo of your kid or your cute puppy or whatever, you can send it to the digital picture frame that you gave as a gift to your family or whatever. And you can even preload photos on it before it ships to them. You can add a gift message. So you can have it shipped directly to them, preloaded with your family photos. They open it up. It's already set up. It's already there. It's already ready to go. And you can share whenever you want, effortlessly, right from your phone, all year long after that. Every frame comes packaged in a premium gift box. There's no price tag on it, so it's really optimized for gift giving. You can't wrap togetherness, but you can frame it. So for a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver matte frames, named #1 by Wirecutter, by using promo code ATP at checkout. That's Aura Frames, spelled AURA, frames.com. Promo code ATP. This deal is exclusive to listeners, and frames sell out fast for the holidays, so order yours now to get it in time. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you so much to Aura Frames for sponsoring our show.
All right, let's talk Cloudflare. If you recall, there was a Cloudflare outage in mid-November, I believe it was. We talked about it, what was it, last week, I think. And John, you had moved your... not moved, but you had put Cloudflare in front of your website to handle certificates and whatnot. And Jay Ramskov writes, good timing with the switch to automatic SSL certificate updates since they will soon start expiring quite quickly. And we will link to, and Jay Ramskov linked to, TLS certificate lifetimes will officially reduce to 47 days. And there's a post on DigiCert that talks about this. So Stephen Davidson at DigiCert writes on May 16th of this year, the CA Browser Forum has officially voted to amend the TLS baseline requirements to set a schedule for shortening both the lifetime of TLS certificates and the reusability of CA-validated information in certificates. The first user impacts of this ballot takes place in March 2026. The new ballot targets certificate validity of 47 days, making automation essential. And if you read this link, and John, correct me whenever you're ready, but my executive summary as the chief summarizer in chief is that it's going, the current timeline is, I think, something like 400 days. And over the next few years, it's going to shorten and shorten and shorten. And what I found fascinating was the 47-day number wasn't actually arbitrary. It was one, and now I'm sort of reading from the article, one maximal month, which is 31 days, plus half of a 30-day month, which is 15 days, plus 1 day of wiggle room. So that's how you get to 47, which I thought was very interesting. But all of this came from Apple. They didn't say it this way, but I kind of read it as Apple railroaded everyone into, look, this should be automated. We should force people to automate it. It's not safe to do it by hand. Let's make it so incredibly short that it's frustrating not to. And apparently it was Apple that really banged this drum really hard and started this whole process.
Yeah, this is a interesting human factors type thing where, I mean, if you've been in the web world or worked on server-side stuff or even just been a customer for long enough, I I'm sure you've encountered a situation where, oops, someone forgot to renew their SSL certificate on this very popular website. And you're like, how can that possibly happen? Like, this is an incredibly popular website. It's the yahoo.com, whatever, like some really popular
That's an incredibly
website.
popular website.
I'm saying back in time, like back, a long time ago, like you go to a website and like there'd be some security error and you can't bring it up. You're like, don't they have a person on staff whose job it is to, and let me tell you, having worked for a lot of big companies that make a lot of money and have a lot of employees, when certificates last for 5 years, it's really easy to miss that 5-year anniversary renewal time when you have to refresh the certificate and only find out about it when like alarms start going off at like 1 a.m. when the certificate expires and nobody noticed, because the person who had done it and then set a calendar reminder for 5 years, like left the company 2.5 years ago, and no one else was on top of that. And then the first time that happens at every company, there's this big meeting and everyone gets together, we're not going to let this happen again, blah, blah, blah. But the point is, when things are done manually and when there's a long time between them, it's easy to forget. So I think Apple's point here is like, if you make the time short enough, there's no way any sane company, you hope, is going to do this manually. There are lots of other dangers of doing it manually too, of secrets leaking out and copying and pasting things into the wrong window and crap like that. You want it to be automated. All that said, I had no idea this was happening, and it is just a happy accident that there's no way I'd want to do the thing that I had to do, like all those sites manually every 47 days. So if I hadn't done the Cloudflare stuff that I'd done, I definitely would have done it once I learned that they're going to keep shortening the thing until it gets to 47 days. So automation is good.
Wes Doman writes, John should look into GitHub Pages for his static site. It's free and can be built from Markdown using GitHub Actions and also includes SSL. I've been running my blog site on it for years now and I've seen zero performance or uptime issues, no server costs, no renewals, etc. I think this is interesting, but you are not a Markdown fan, if I'm not mistaken, right?
No, and I wouldn't hitch my wagon to the GitHub star. I mean, it's Microsoft owned and they're doing some weird stuff and they're not primarily a web host. So it's fun for like a cute little thing and it's great that it works, but I wouldn't want to put my site there.
Fair enough. And then an anonymous Cloudflare employee wrote, you can use Cloudflare Workers, Pages, or even R2 to host static sites there directly. No need to run your own origin for this, all free. Workers started as a serverless offering, but is now able to host static assets too, and thus do what Pages does. So Workers are certainly the way to go for new stuff. Beyond static assets, Workers can be used to build insanely scalable full-stack web applications without issues. Would have been perfect for the Overcast chapter image backend, for example. The Workers plus R2 plus KV, which I believe is key value storage, plus durable object stack is very powerful and scalable.
So I actually looked into this. Pages, it seems like it's kind of deprecated, even if it's not really deprecated. They're like, Workers is the new thing. It can do everything that Pages did, but Pages was very aligned towards letting you make static sites. R2 is just like S3. It's just like a bucket or whatever. But I think R2 has some interesting features in terms of URL rewriting, like just on the bucket that S3 doesn't have. So you could really serve a static site and not have like .html extensions on all your URLs, because I think R2 will do stuff. I haven't entirely looked into that. But what I did look into is Workers. Workers has a way of saying like, you have static assets and put them in a directory and then, deploy your worker, and you can run it locally or you can run it on the Cloudflare servers, and you point it to a domain, and it's real easy. And I set that up on my website, and then I tried to do my first deployment. I was just using a different Scratch domain. I tried to do the deployment, and it's like, looks like you have a file that's more than 25 megabytes, and assets can't be more than 25 megabytes. I'm like, that really puts a damper on Workers. And they're like, well, you can put the files that are bigger than 25 megabytes in R2, and then you can in your worker config, you can say if a request comes in for this, route it to the R2 bucket instead of the secure assets thing. But I was like, I don't want to have to figure out all the 25 meg files that are over here and do all this routing. So let me just do pure worker in front of R2, because the worker, you get to actually write like Node.js code or whatever, where you can do any routing you want and do all your redirects. You just write code instead of having to do like a server config. And I got that set up, and this is everything I'm describing took place today. So I was able to explore a lot of this pretty quickly, and I have basically my website up with Workers all backed by R2, using a different domain, and it seems fine. I might move the real site there. Again, this is all entirely free, which is great. Like, you can run code, like, the quote unquote code is like a JavaScript file that's like a page of code. Like, just, when a request comes in, what should I do with it? And you get to implement all of your routing logic however you want to do it. And my routing logic is not complicated. I'm basically just removing .html file extensions. I also get to set all my cache expiration headers and do all the stuff that you would do in a typical web server config. So I'm pretty impressed by it, but I haven't decided whether I am going to move fully move the site there. Right now, I'm still just putting Cloudflare and it's caching in front of my crappy shared hosting thing. I may actually just leave the crappy shared hosting to Mulder and move all the actual pages to Cloudflare. Tune in next week for an update.
Good deal. And as for using it for Overcast images, two reasons why I haven't done this. Number one, when you actually look at the number of images I would have to host, a lot of times any kind of like managed image service is priced per source image. And even if you try to like kind of make your own, when you look at like what the scale would be for me to do this for every podcast and every podcast's individual episodes of episode art, we're talking millions of images, the small versions of which at least get a lot of traffic, and the big versions get some traffic. So it's a very large number, and usually the economics of it are way out of whack for what that would be. But secondly, I also don't like relying on a proprietary service in the hosting world that nothing else can replicate. Right now, I've been with Linode for a while. I just use the basic Linode compute instances, which used to be called VPSs, and these are just little Linux servers. And if Linode goes bad, which it has been, I'm able to move to other hosts, which I'm looking at, that can also host any kind of Linode computing instance, and everyone can host that. AWS can host that. There's DigitalOcean. There's different other hosts. I'm looking at Hetzner now. Because they're apparently in the U.S. now, which I didn't realize. And so there's, if that host goes bad, whatever host I'm on, I can move without rewriting my entire stack. Now, moving hosts is not fun, but I can do it. When I was using S3, as I was describing, and then using Linode Object Storage, that's the same like standard compatible service. It was no big deal to move from S3 to Linode Objects, and then when Linode Objects for some reason was limited to 50, 500 million, whatever it was, entries, it was no big deal to then move out of Linode Objects into Cloudflare R2, which John was just talking about, because these are all like plug-in compatible, identical functioning services, basically. When you get into anything that's more specialized, that's more managed by one of these, or like that, a capability that only Cloudflare has, that means if Cloudflare goes bad, I can't move very easily. And the kind of decisions I make for my hosting, I look at the long term, because moving hosts is terrible. Dealing with server code more than you have to is terrible. I don't love dealing with servers at all. I do it to achieve, it's a means to an end. So I want my servers to be as low maintenance as possible. The last thing I want is for anything I choose today to be different or discontinued or merged with something else in 3 or 5 years. And you might think, oh, you won't have to worry about it. Well, Overcast is 11 years old. I do have to worry about things like that. And so I've been burned in the past of, anytime I've relied on some kind of like new managed thing that, oh, you run on this other cloud service thing by this provider and you automatically get this capability that it's just managed for you. And yeah, usually within, 5 years, if you're looking at that kind of time span, a lot of those services are no longer there, or they jack up the prices really high and they're no longer affordable, or when you get to Overcast scale, they weren't affordable to begin with. So like there's all sorts of reasons why I do very boring things in the hosting world. Mostly it's because it's a lot cheaper, and at my scale that matters. And then secondly, it is because of the longevity concerns. This is a rapidly moving industry, and anything too specialized, I don't like to rely on.
Yeah, and on that front with my little dinky static site, as it turns out, doing something like this, I mean, again, R2 is just like an S3 replacement. I'm using S3 compatible commands like the rclone command and stuff. Like, that's kind of a plug-in thing because the S3 API has become the de facto API. But the amount of like custom code that I have to essentially port from my Apache config on my crappy shared host to my worker.js file, it's basically the same. Like there's like a page of code you got to write in Apache for like redirect rules and expires headers or whatever. And then there's like a page of JavaScript that you have to write that does the same thing. That's around the range of stuff that you want to change. No matter I have a static host, I can take it, static site, I can take it anywhere. What if I took it to somewhere that uses Nginx? Then I would have to write a page of Nginx config somewhere, probably. Like it's impossible to move things without changing anything. Like you're always going to have to do something. But if it's like a page of code, and you might think, well, that's just configuration. Now you have to write code. the like index.js file that I wrote is not any more complicated than having to look up what the directives for Nginx or Apache are. So if you have a static site, don't think you're not going to have to do some kind of thing when you move your stuff, but it's the difference between like, all right, so I ported a one page of config to one page of JavaScript versus Marco's thing where it's like, oh, you wrote something for workers, but now you got to get it to work in AWS Lambda, and all the APIs are different because the worker API thing that talks to R2 and everything is nothing like the API set for, talking to S3 and Lambda or whatever. Even though R2 and S3 are both compatible, the JavaScript interface to that and to the request response and everything is different. I don't think there's a de facto standard for sort of like serverless worker type things, but I might be wrong about that. But anyway, that's the thing to keep in mind. And yes, I kind of agree with Marco's thing of like, look, if you just give me a server with the CPU and memory and disk and let me run software on it, that's probably the most portable thing.
So coming back to Cloudflare, we spoke about this, I think it was last week. And then shortly after the episode was released, we got some feedback. Tony Denke writes, guys, please don't talk about Cloudflare again, and conveniently included a 500 internal server error Cloudflare image. And then Landon wrote, the irony of listening to John talk about the next Cloudflare outage and experiencing it at the same time. So as it turns out, on the 5th of December, there was another Cloudflare outage. Starting at 8:47 Universal Time, a portion of Cloudflare's network began experiencing significant failures. The incident was resolved at 9:12, or about 25 minutes of total impact, when all services were fully restored. A subset of customers were impacted, accounting for approximately 28% of all HTTP traffic served by Cloudflare. The issue was triggered by changes being made to our body parsing logic while attempting to detect and mitigate an industry-wide vulnerability disclosed this week in React server components.
Yeah, as I noted last week, my, the wrong-headed notion that I said, like, oh, Cloudflare. Yeah, I always meant to move to Cloudflare, and they just had an outage, right? So they probably won't have another one soon. That's not how outages work. I was hoping this one would be caused by them trying to mitigate the problems of the first outage, but it just turns out it was caused by something else. But they did mention some of the changes they were making for the other outage, yeah. Anyway, bad luck, but this one didn't affect every site. In fact, my site stayed up the entire time, so lucky me. But it was funny that I talked about moving to Cloudflare right after they had a big outage, and they immediately had another one.
All right, with regard to the dingus and saying one's name, Jonathan Gilbranson writes, regarding whether Siri answers in voice, text, both, etc., this is configurable in settings and then Apple Intelligence and Siri. And there is a knowledge-based article that we will link, and additionally an image of this. And it says in Siri responses, spoken responses is the header, and the three options are prefer silent responses, automatic, or prefer spoken responses. And the footer reads, Siri will always speak responses in certain circumstances, like when you appear to be driving or using headphones with the screen off.
Yeah, so I did figure that out with the screen off thing. I don't know if the automatic is the default, but that's what mine was set to. And honestly, I left it on automatic. It's good to know if I ever want to demand that it say my name out loud, I can switch it to prefer spoken responses, but I guess automatic normally works fine, except for that one time when I really, really needed it to speak to me and it wouldn't.
Yep. Oren Iden writes, after hearing episode 668, I tried getting Siri to say my name and it wouldn't work. Then I had the idea of trying with my AirPods while the phone was in my pocket, and it actually worked. Siri said my name. As a side note, I also tried getting Siri to call my daughter, but it couldn't find her no matter what I did. I added her as my daughter in the contacts app and tried telling Siri her name, but nothing helped. What finally worked was opening her contact page and telling Siri to set this contact as my daughter. Also, be grateful that your native language is English. I once tried using Siri in Hebrew, and let's just say it wasn't very pretty.
Wow, is that Apple Intelligence? You can go to a page on the screen and say this, and it knows what it is. It's a miracle.
That is a miracle.
I would never have thought to try that because I would think it was one of those things they hadn't added to Siri yet.
Right?
Sad.
Well, Siri's been able to do things like when you say this in the past, you could say things like, remind me about this tomorrow at 1. And what it would do is whatever the the current NS user activity was. So you could actually, I don't think it ever worked well in third-party apps. I never actually tried it much, but if there was a web page that you wanted to be reminded of, you could say, remind me of this tomorrow. If there's a phone call, and it would actually create a reminder that would link to that thing. That still does work, but I don't know how that will change in the era of Apple Intelligence, which is supposed to be a lot more aware of stuff like that.
Then we had a handful of people write in about a little bit of an oops. That was kind of our fault. Sean Santry writes, I was listening to ATP episode 668 via CarPlay, and when you said, Dingus, say my name, my Dingus answered. Then, since the podcast had briefly paused, Overcast helpfully rewound exactly to the point where you said, Dingus, say my name. Lather, rinse, repeat. Reed Sorensen writes, thanks to the handy Smart Resume feature in Overcast, the Siri discussion in episode 668 threw my phone into a 5-second time loop of Dingus, say my name, while I was driving in conditions too snowy to hit the skip button.
Hey Siri, buy Overcast Premium. Confirm.
Lots of people wrote in with this. Yeah, as I said in the header here, it's kind of a team effort. Me saying it and Marco making an app that will rewind just long enough to make it say that over and over again. And I also like the person who, speaking of snow, Casey in Richmond, who couldn't fix the situation because they were driving in the snow and they had to keep their hands on the wheel. Good job. It's more important to keep your hands on the wheel. Just, eventually we'll get through this. But yeah, it wasn't just like one person this happened to. We had a bad coincidence of timing and speech that caused a lot of people to go into a loop with Overcast.
That made me, every time I saw it, I felt bad, but every single one of them made me giggle. All right, we have a update from friend of the show _David Smith. We were talking last episode about Alan Dye's departure, and the reaction to the iOS 26 or all the 26 OSs. And John, you had made some passing reference, I think, to _'s post about the slower than expected rollout. So building on that, Dave in 20th of November wrote, last year around a week before Thanksgiving was when Apple hit the go wide to everyone button for iOS 18 updates, resulting in a rapid uptick in adoption over the following weeks. And we'll include a link to this with the picture in the show notes. This year, we didn't get the big jump in iOS adoption right before Thanksgiving. And again, that's in David's tweet. And then on the 8th of December, Dave writes, aha, someone at Apple hit the update everyone button over the weekend. So now I'm seeing the more rapid uptick in adoption of iOS 26 that I've been hoping for. We'll probably hit the majority mark in the next couple of days.
Yeah, we got that feedback after we published the episode. When we recorded it, I said that _ hadn't seen the uptick, but as soon as we published it, people were saying, I'm seeing the iOS 26 getting pushed more aggressively. And sure enough, _ is like, yep, it's happening. The line is bending. So yeah, I don't know why they waited longer this year. Maybe because the 26.0 was buggier or whatever, but or caution about people being cranky about the OS. But it seems like it's happening. So I guess over the Christmas holidays or the end of year holidays, ask your relatives what they think of iOS 26 and did they enjoy getting it pushed onto their phone.
Fun fact, it's because we brought it up. That's why they flipped the button. They heard ATP and said, oh, shit, we forgot. And so that's why the switch got flipped. You're welcome, everyone.
I think there was something up with, obviously we all know 26.0 had a lot of bugs. I had an Overcast update that I shipped that would crash on one or two of the early betas of 26.1 or 2. I forget which point really. I think 0.1, because 0.1's out. Yeah. So some of the early betas of 26.1, it would crash because they had added an API that I was calling in the shipping version, but the first two betas didn't have that API. Anyway, what I learned from feedback emails about that and from digging in with certain people, trying to figure out why it was crashing for them, is that it sounded like their company that manages OS releases and their IT department that approves OS releases for their phones, their company had mandated one of those early beta versions of 26.1. Now, I also heard the same story from at least 5 or 6 different people about their company approved version was this 26.1 beta, and that's why they were on it. So it seems like some big company or some, standards and practices followed by some group of companies actually had their employees install 26.1 beta and lock them on that until I guess a better version could be approved or whatever. So that I think is really interesting. That maybe rumor out there of 26.0 was so bad that they forced their users onto this beta and then just haven't updated it yet.
I doubt it was a rumor. It's probably because it didn't work with some part of their intranet or whatever, and they basically couldn't use 26.0, so they had to stop people from using 26.0. They could have just stopped them from using any of the 26 OSs, but maybe it was too late and people who had upgraded, so they forced everyone to 26.1 beta to basically stop the bleeding of whatever problem they had with 26.0. But yeah, not an ideal situation.
Well, and it could have even just been as simple as they're buying new iPhones. They come with 26.0. They got to.
Yeah. They can't. They have no choice. They can't downgrade them. But 26.0 doesn't work with their corporate VPN or has some other bug that they're we can't let people run this. We have to mandate they use 26.1 beta. And guess what? Betas are beta. Yeah. But apparently still maybe better than 26.0.
It was. Although can I give a tiny little complaint here? I know we're on a roll. I just want to a really quick complaint. tethering is still totally broken on my iPhone 17 Pro. It's to the point where like I'm trying to turn it off and disable it because I'm now just carrying around a standalone 5G hotspot, and sometimes my laptop will attach to tethering on the phone without me realizing it instead of joining the hotspot's Wi-Fi network, and I will be on the train and stuff will just slow down and stop working. Oh, that's weird. Are we in a bad reception area? Oh no, I see the little chain link icon. Oh, I'm on tethering. Why does it keep going to tethering? So I spent all of the last few years trying to get my laptop to please automatically connect to tethering whenever you can. Now I have to get it to stop. Please stop automatically connecting to tethering because it's so bad. It's completely broken. I have no idea what's up, if it's my phone, if it's AT&T. I've never had this problem with any other phone, and I've been on the same AT&T setup for a very long time. But tethering is completely broken for me. And not in a way that like I could ask for support, because yeah, it'll work for a while. So like it's not like it's not working at all. It works for a bit, and then eventually just connections start failing and timing out, and nothing happens. And I don't know what to do about this. I've never had an iPhone that had this problem. And I did some quick research the other day, and I found like some Reddit threads about it. So like I think it might be other people as well, but it didn't seem like a massively widespread thing. So if anybody knows, what the heck am I supposed to do about this? Please let me know. Thanks.
We are sponsored this week by Leesa. All right, folks, I'm going to go a little off script here, kind of a lot off script. So when we get an ad read, we're told, here's the sorts of things we'd like you to talk about. And we're often told, well, you can talk about your own experience, and that's okay too. Well, we're going to test the limits of that, because let me tell you a story. This is a 100% true story. Like 15 years ago, Aaron and I bought a mattress at a local place here in Richmond. It's a place that not only did they sell mattresses, but they manufacture the mattresses themselves. I love this mattress. However, this place went out of business. And for like 5 or 10 years now, Erin has said to me, I'd really like a new mattress. It's time. And even though intellectually I know she's right, emotionally, I'm not ready, because in part, I haven't found a mattress that I think is at least equivalent, if not better. Well, as part of the ad sponsorship, Leesa sent us a mattress to try, and we got one sized for Michaela's bed, and we slept on it for a couple nights. And genuinely, this is the first mattress I've found in 15 years that I thought, you know what? I could sleep on this every day. That's the honest to goodness truth. So Leesa has a lineup of beautifully crafted mattresses tailored to how you sleep. Each mattress is designed with specific sleep positions and feel preferences in mind. They have a litany of different options. It's really, really great. They have natural options, different options, hybrid options, all sorts of different stuff. Leesa mattresses are meticulously designed and assembled in the United States of America for exceptional quality. Plus, they back it up with free shipping, easy returns, and a 120-night sleep trial. Leesa has been tested and awarded the best hybrid mattress by New York Times' Wirecutter and is exclusively featured by West Elm as their go-to mattress partner. So if this sounds appealing to you, and it should, what are you going to do? You're going to go to Leesa.com for 25% off mattresses, plus get an extra $50 off with the promo code ATP, exclusive for our listeners. That's Leesa.com, promo code ATP for 25% off mattresses, plus an extra $50 off. Support our show and let Leesa know that we sent you after checkout. So what do? Like I said, you go to Leesa.com, use promo code ATP. Thank you to Leesa for sponsoring the show. All right, so Intel might be making chips for Apple. We talked about this a little bit, but it's more than what we initially thought, and also we have some feedback about it. Tambourine Man writes, one thing I didn't think you guys emphasized enough on the Intel-made M-series topic is that Intel could still be a potential competitor. Apple will be providing them with state-of-the-art chip schematics, what's stopping Intel from learning a few tricks and implementing them in their x86 offerings. That's something no TSMC customer has to worry about, and it seems like a major competitive advantage that TSMC has.
Yeah, presumably Intel, in entering the foundry business, cleanly separates the foundry business from their own chip designs, but it is a thing that you should worry about. And also, like, obviously, you can learn a lot about your competitors' chips without them giving you the designs just by chopping the top off of them and examining them and stuff. But yes, the schematics probably help as well. I think a lot of companies do walk that line. I mean, Apple itself, most how well it does. Like, Apple has its own apps, and yet it also accepts third-party apps. Now, granted, it doesn't get the source code to them, but it is an advantage to know what third parties are doing because you can see their apps in development or whatever. And lots of other companies do this. Microsoft has their own first-party games, as do other console developers and stuff, and yet they also solicit third-party games. So I don't think this is an impossible thing for Intel to deal with, but it is a much cleaner relationship with TSMC. It doesn't have any chips of its own, and you don't have to worry about them making them, at least right now.
Didn't Samsung manufacture Apple's chips for a little while?
Yeah, for a long time.
Next item.
Yeah, there you go.
David Beck writes, Apple split the manufacturing for the A8 between Samsung and TSMC before switching entirely to TSMC.
Oh, there's a graph I meant to put in here. Maybe I'll put it in next week or whatever. It was showing the number of manufacturers for a particular transistor process node or whatever, starting way back in the day of I don't know, it's like 90 nanometers, and when they were much larger than now. And the number of companies who manufacture the different process node sizes goes down dramatically from like 15 to 20, and we're currently at like 2, maybe 3, and that is TSMC, Samsung, and then on the graph, Intel was in gray. Like, it was grayed out. It's like, well, technically they might kind of sort of be doing it, but yeah. So Samsung is one of the last fabs standing. Still a little bit behind TSMC, and Intel is maybe in the race, but there used to be so many more. Even though there was a big lead, the other ones would eventually get on board, and they weren't on it all at the same time. But the graph is just showing who has ever made a 90 nanometer chip, and it had this huge list. Who has ever made a 3 nanometer chip? Way smaller list.
Gafrito Marochi writes, didn't Apple's chip boss talk about packaging being the thing to watch out for? And that is something we talked about in the past. We talked about it in episode 562, and this was based on Johnny Sruji and an interview that he had. And John has been kind enough to find a timestamp to the timestamp link for the video on YouTube. So thank you, John. So why are we talking about packaging in the first place? Because on November 18th, and Alexander K. in Tech Power Up writes, Apple, Broadcom, and Qualcomm are considering Intel Foundry for its advanced packaging technologies, which could allow Intel to significantly increase its foundry revenue without manufacturing the actual silicon. Job listings from Apple, Broadcom, and Qualcomm highlight Intel's Embedded Multi-Die Interconnect Bridge, or EMIB, as a key requirement for packaging engineer positions. Qualcomm CEO recently stated that Intel is not an option today. He noted that Intel's current foundry node, likely 18A, is not suitable for their mobile chips. The main focus of the 18A node is not on mobile low-power SoCs, but rather on mid-range and high-power solutions. However, the 18A node is seemingly not what is attracting customers like Qualcomm. It is the packaging that Intel offers. Last year, Broadcom tested the 18A node, but expressed disappointment. However, now Intel's advanced packaging is emerging as a promising alternative to TSMC's COWOS and other packaging types. Intel's Foundry advanced packaging portfolio enables designers to utilize 2D, 2.5D, and 3D building blocks to optimize cost, power, and bandwidth. EMIB is a substrate embedded silicon bridge that offers localized high-density die-to-die routing without the cost and area drawbacks of a full-size silicon interposer.
So this is an interesting twist on the rumor of Intel's going to make chips. So this is a November story, and actually people are interested in Intel, not because of 18A, which some customers are, at least 2 customers here are saying, we didn't like it. It's not great. 18A is not what we need for mobile chips or for low powered chips, but they have their own packaging things, sort of like, I know we've talked about these weird abbreviations that TSMC has, like COWOS and all the other ones, basically a way of taking a bunch of smaller dies and putting them together in an efficient manner. It's easier to make a bunch of small dies because you have a higher chance of a small die coming out with no defects than a bigger one, right? So if you can make a bunch of small ones and connect them, AMD has been doing that with its chiplets or whatever. And the SOIC is a thing that TSMC is supposedly using for the M5 Pro and M5 Max. We'll see when those are released early next year. Intel has its EMIB thing, which is a way of stacking a bunch of dies together. So maybe Apple is going to fab the silicon for the M6 or M7 at TSMC and then give those little dies to Intel for it to package with the EMIB thing. And maybe that's the source of the rumor saying, Intel's going to be fabbing the M series chips for Apple. Maybe they're not going to be fabbing them. Maybe they're going to be packaging them. Lots of rumors swirling around this, but I'm not sure which way this will go. But having both Qualcomm and Broadcom say 18A, fast, but not good for low power, doesn't make me think, that means, is Apple going to make the base M series chip on a process that's not good for low power, or are they just not interested in 18A? It's really going to be 14A if Intel ever even builds those things. So keep an eye on that. Packaging, as Sergi says, is the place of it. It's interesting. I mean, the real packaging thing is the SOIC is a packaging innovation that I'm assuming Apple will tout when the new M series chips comes out. We'll see if they tout that, but everybody's trying to do something with packaging, and this is Intel's take on it.
All right, and then finally, reading from Mac Rumors from a few days back, and Joe Rosignol over at Mac Rumors. In a research note with the investment firm GF Securities this week, obtained by Mac Rumors, analyst Jeff Poo said he and his colleagues now expect Intel to reach a supply deal with Apple for at least some non-Pro iPhone chips starting in 2028. The non-Pro iPhone chips would be manufactured with Intel's future 14A process, according to Poo. The research note did not provide any other details about these potential plans, but based on the standard timeframe, Intel could start supplying Apple with the A22 chip for devices like the iPhone 20 and the iPhone 20e in around 3 years from now.
More rumors, not for Mac chips, now for phone chips, which are even smaller and even lower power, but this is about 14A and not 18A. So I guess all these rumors only take place if I keep saying Apple, if Intel actually builds and ramps up 14A and 18A to actually be able to manufacture chips. But I would keep an eye on this. It's pretty interesting that Apple is supposedly in talks for not just Mac stuff, which are way lower volume than the phone, but like, I guess it's not the Pro chips, it's not the flagship, but even the non-Pro phones, they sell a lot of those. So to be talking to Intel about that is something.
All right, and finally for follow-up today, we had a fascinating article, actually a couple of articles from our good friend John Gruber. One of them is entitled Bad Die Job, which is very good. I'm going to read a fair bit of it because a lot of it is pertinent, but it is worth, if you are not driving or whatever, it is worth having a read of this entire article. It's a little bit on the longer side for Gruber stuff, but it is very, very good and absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, and the reason I'm reading that, put these long passages in here, is like you just summarize it like, Gruber, not a fan of Alan Dye. Like that would be the quick summary. Why do we need to have all this stuff? I thought it was notable, and again, Casey will read some excerpts here so you get a feel for it, so you don't have to read the whole thing, of exactly how much Gruber trashes Alan Dye. Like, he's not above like calling it like he sees it or whatever and being blunt, but he spent a long time saying a lot of terrible things about Alan Dye. And we'll talk about it when you finish reading things, but just, I mean, I think in some places maybe he's a little bit unfair, but either way, this is sort of the most, I don't know, the most angry, the most vitriol I've seen from Gruber in a long time.
Right. So again, this isn't the whole article, but it gives you the general gist. Everyone I've spoken to at Apple is happy, if not downright giddy, at the news that Stephen LeMay is replacing Dye. LeMay is well-liked personally and deeply respected talent-wise. Said one source in a position to know the choices, quote, I don't think there was a better choice than LeMay, quote. The sentiment within the ranks at Apple is that today's news is almost too good to be true. People had given up hope that Dye would ever get squeezed out, and no one expected that he'd just up and leave on his own. If you care about design, there's nowhere to go but down after leaving Apple. What people overlooked is the obvious. Alan Dye doesn't actually care about design. Shots fired.
I see the construction there and the snark. I'm sure he does care about design. He's just bad at it.
Or maybe the kind of design that he is better at is not software UI design. Like,
maybe laying out ads in magazines.
I mean, like, look, he rose to a high level at Apple when he was doing the print and packaging and marketing. He rose to a high level for a reason. He probably is a good designer in certain ways, and maybe he's a good designer in different types of design. Maybe he's a good designer when working in different teams or with different people around him or above him, maybe. But he got to a point in Apple where he was not a good designer. And I don't necessarily blame him personally for that. I blame Apple for putting him in that position that he shouldn't have had.
Yep. So continuing with Gruber, the oddest thing about Alan Dye's stint leading software design is that there are effectively zero design critics who've been on his side. The debate regarding Apple's software design over the last decade isn't between those on Dye's side and those against. It's only a matter of debating how bad it's been and how far it's fallen from its previous remarkable heights. It's rather extraordinary in today's hyperpartisan world that there's nearly universal agreement amongst actual practitioners of user interface design that Alan Dye is a fraud who led the company deeply astray. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get through this with a straight face. It was a big problem inside the company, too. I'm aware of dozens of designers who've left Apple out of frustration over the company's direction. From the stories I'm aware of, the theme is identical. These designers are driven to do great work, and under Alan Dye, doing great work was no longer the guiding principle at Apple. Designers chose to work at Apple to do the best work in the industry. That has stopped being true under Alan Dye. The most talented designers I know are the harshest critics of Dye's body of work and the direction in which it's been heading.
Yeah, this also echoes what we've heard elsewhere. And we've seen some of the, some people like Louis Mantia, a great designer. He's been blogging about it, but there's also people who, who don't want to speak out publicly because it's bad for career moves for a lot of people. But we've heard from a lot of people that this is the case, that it seemed during the die era at Apple, which did not seem like it was going to end anytime soon. It seemed like there was not a place there anymore for people who cared about user interface design the way that we all knew Apple for, like years ago. Like why do we all come to the Mac? Why do we all love these products so much? And why do we stick around through some of the more difficult times? Let's be honest, it isn't all roses, and it's because of details and priorities and values that Alan Dye's design in user interface just didn't really practice, or outright had disregard for, or outright despised, it seemed. And this is why, Gruber is being pretty harsh here. What got under Gruber's skin probably is all the years of Alan Dye's software organization or software design organization doing things that were pretty antithetical to the reason why we all love this platform, these platforms. Especially the Mac. There's very few people besides John Siracusa maybe who love the Mac as much as John Gruber, and to Alan Dye's design style on the Mac was really rough and outright dismissive and kind of just going through with a wrecking ball, not understanding any of it and not caring and just plowing through. So yeah, Gruber got fired up, and I think some of this is a little harsh, but I was reading it with popcorn, honestly. I'm not incredibly proud of that, but I love this. It felt like an amazing expression of a lot of the frustration that I've been feeling for years. So I was very happy to see all of this.
Oh, goodness. All right, so continuing with the other post, Alan Dye was in Tim Cook's blind spot. I'd have thrown OpenAI in that list of companies where it would have been surprising but not shocking for Dye to leave Apple for. But that simply wasn't possible given Johnny Ive's relationship with Sam Altman, Love From's collaboration with OpenAI with the I.O. project, and Ive's utter disdain for Dye's talent, leadership, and personality. Citation needed, but woof.
Yeah, I believe this is the first we are hearing about this. I believe I'd never heard before that. What Gruber is saying, that I guess he's heard that Johnny Ive really does not like Alan Dye or his work, which is surprising because it seems from what we were told or what was reported, it seems like Johnny Ive is the person who put Dye in that role. Maybe that's not true, or maybe Ive used to like him and didn't like where he went with the job. Who knows? But that's interesting news, and that would be certainly the first time I've seen it.
Yeah. So, like I said, the reason I think this post is notable is, first, Gruber does have connections to people inside Apple. So he tends not to cite his sources or do the people said like they do in Bloomberg and other things or whatever. But suffice it to say that he does know people at Apple. People at Apple do talk to him. So I take seriously when he's stating as fact that like everybody he's heard from has said they didn't like Dye. And
absolutely.
Right. And it's not just like the 5 people like he talks to on his podcast, but like I'm sure he's getting sources there. Like no defenders are coming from Apple there. And the Johnny Ive thing is another example of just dropping that in there as if it's a fact with no sourcing, but presumably he's not basing that. He's not pulling that out of thin air. That's coming from somewhere. And I can imagine, I was kind of having his foot out the door for a while at Apple and trying to leave, and Tim was making him stay. And at a certain point, you don't really get to pick who succeeds you. You're on your way out the door. You can give your opinion, but the fact is you're leaving. And so once he's gone, maybe he didn't want Dye to be his successor, but once you leave the company, you don't get to have your opinion doesn't matter anymore. You're out of there. They get to pick who replaces you. So maybe he's always been mad about that. The other reason I think this is interesting is because I felt like I've been sort of internally flipping out, as with a couple other selected people who I follow on Mastodon, about the poor choices in the 26 OS. It's not that they're terrible, as I've always said in the show. Like they're fine. You'll get through it. It's not the worst thing in the world. It could have gone much worse, right? But the things that are bad about them are so like they're like, the canary in the coal mine. So such glaring mistakes for no good reason that are indefensible that, they don't ruin the whole OS. It doesn't make it super terrible. But like if you the more you know about user interface design, the more you say, someone who could have done that, someone who made this decision here. No, it doesn't ruin the OS, but it shows that they have no idea what they're doing. And I've been just flipping out about it. And everyone else I've seen, including Gruber, has been like, oh, the 26 OSs are out there here. They're not that bad. It's or whatever. And I'm like, maybe I'm the only one. Maybe it's just me and those 2 other people I follow on Mastodon who just cannot believe what they've done with these OSs. Again, not because it's so terrible it makes them unusable, but just because like these mistakes are indicative of just a complete lack of understanding of what good user interface design is. And they're just lucky that they've been made in areas that doesn't really impact the usability as much as it could. Like, and I wondered why I wasn't seeing more stuff from Gruber saying, I can't believe that they made these mistakes, but I guess he was saving it all up because, some of the stuff we cut out here was like his opinion of it, in particular, Tahoe and that design is just as harsh as mine and the other people. He just hasn't been saying it. And if you're thinking like, what is this Alan Dye? Everyone all of a sudden hates him, but I never heard anything about him. Well, I'm going to say if you listen to ATP over the last like several years, you've heard the name Alan Dye a lot. Usually Marco saying he hates his guts and me saying, well, we don't know if Alan Dye is responsible for this.
I'm not that mean. I don't know the guy personally. I don't like his work.
I know, but you were using it as a placeholder of like Alan Dye's design or whatever. And I was like, well, it's Apple's design. How much is Alan Dye responsible for it? But now that he's left, people are coming out of the woodwork and saying, yeah, it was totally him. Like, it makes sense. He was in charge of it, but like, it's, again, it's difficult to know what's going on inside the company. But like, I feel like this is people who now feel free to speak, essentially, that everyone sort of had this opinion, and maybe Marco was free with his opinion in the past several years, but other people were more kind of like saying, oh, maybe, it's just, we don't know what goes inside Apple. I know Alan Dye is in charge, so on and so forth. But for me, it was when he was, at WWDC introducing liquid glass stuff. I was like, well, he's the public face of it now, so he's fair game. And shortly after, he just leaves the company, and then everybody comes out of the woodwork and is like, no, I totally hated that guy and everything he did. It was like, it's just shocking to me. Like, granted, this is a tiny little inside baseball world, and the regular public thus far has not had a very strong reaction. But as Gruber pointed out in the article, as I've said in the past, the more you know about this, the more you know about what makes good user interface design, the more concerning the recent changes have been. Not because they have destroyed the products, but because they reveal the decision-making to be flawed in a way that is embarrassing for a company with the history and reputation of Apple. And so hopefully that will change.
We are sponsored this episode by Factor. Eating well during this time of year can be really difficult because you're surrounded by temptations and all these delicious holiday foods, and no one has time for anything because it's super busy. So Factor is great for this. They have chef-prepped, dietitian-approved meals to help you stay more balanced and energized throughout the most indulgent and busy time of year. So unlike meal kits that require a lot of prep time and stuff, Factor delivers fully prepared, ready-to-eat meals that you heat up and they're ready in just 2 minutes. And they have a huge variety to choose from. There's a wider selection than ever of weekly meal options, including things like premium seafood choices like salmon and shrimp at no extra cost. They also have things like GLP-1 friendly meals, Mediterranean diet options packed with protein and healthy fats. So when you're surrounded by holiday temptations, you can actually have really good food as your meals. That's what Factor is great at. They've sent me some samples over time, and I've actually become a customer because I love how fast and easy Factor meals are to make. And they go over really well with the family too. Wife, kid, everyone loves the Factor meals. They've gotten great reviews in the Armed household. You can have all sorts of wonderful meals with Factor. 97% of customers say that Factor helped them live a healthier life. Real people, real results, staying on track, even during this season of indulgence. So, eat smart at factormeals.com/ATP50off and use code ATP50off to get 50% off your first box plus free breakfast for a year. That's code ATP50off at factormeals.com for 50% off your first box plus free breakfast for 1 year. This exclusive holiday offer won't last, so lock in your savings before the New Year rush. Offer only valid for new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto-renewing subscription purchase. Thank you so much to Factor for sponsoring our show.
And speaking of departures, moving out of follow-up and into topics, Apple has announced more executive transitions.
Tis the season.
'Tis the season to be lonely. Apple today, on December 12th, announced that Jennifer Newstead will become Apple's general counsel on March 1, 2026, following a transition of duties from Kate Adams, who has served as Apple's general counsel since 2017. She will join Apple as senior vice president in January, reporting to CEO Tim Cook. In addition, Leesa Jackson, vice president for Environment Policy and Social Initiatives, will retire in late January 2026. The government affairs organization will transition to Adams, who will oversee the team until her retirement late next year, after which it will be led by Newstead. Newstead's title will become Senior Vice President, General Counsel, and Government Affairs, reflecting the combining of the two organizations. The Environment and Social Initiatives teams will report to Apple Chief Operating Officer Sabi Khan. Newstead was most recently the chief legal officer at Meta, and previously served as the legal advisor of the U.S. Department of State, where she led the legal team responsible for advising the Secretary of State on legal issues affecting the conduct of U.S. foreign relations. She held a range of other positions in government earlier in her career as well, including as general counsel of the White House Office of Management and Budget, as a principal deputy assistant attorney general in the Office of Legal Policy at the Department of Justice, as associate White House counsel and a law clerk to somebody. She also spent a dozen years at some law firm where she advised global corporations on a wide variety of issues. She got her undergraduate at Harvard and her law degree at Yale, so not a dummy. Gurman writes, Jennifer Newstead helped oversee Meta's successful antitrust battle with the U.S. Federal Trade Commission, experience that's likely to prove useful in Apple's own legal fight with the Justice Department over alleged anti-competitive practices. Anonymous writes, Apple's corporate values were supposedly the environment and privacy. Today, Apple eliminated the VP of Environment position and hired as SVP someone who not only worked at Facebook, but also helped write the U.S. Patriot Act, which is one of the most egregious violations of privacy among other civil rights in U.S. history. Cool.
So this change here, right? So more people leaving. Leesa Jackson, you've seen her in videos increasingly as her career went on at Apple. She was on the roof. Was she on the roof of the building? I forget. Anyway, her face has been in keynotes more and more as her career has gone on, and she's the environment person leading that whole initiative. She is retiring, not leaving for another company, and she's having someone else take over her position, but then that person's going to retire, and then all that environmental stuff is getting sort of wrapped up and split up, and then the general counsel, Jennifer Newstead, is taking over from the as the new general counsel in this new combined position, blah, blah, blah. Jennifer Newstead is making a lot of people angry because she worked on the Patriot Act, which, for people who don't follow U.S. politics, is some panic legislation that our legislature passed when everyone was scared of terrorists, to say the government should be allowed to look at all your crap. Terrorists. It's either terrorists or like children are in danger. Anyway, incredibly why it's relevant to Apple is, as he says, it's a privacy type thing. Like, the Patriot Act was, it's named, it's right out of a movie. The Patriot Act, Eagle Screech, it's got a name that who can be against the Patriot Act, where the government gets to, pry into all your information and crap.
It was the perfect George W. Bush era law name.
Yeah. And so anyway, she was part of that. She's worked for the Trump administration. She worked for Meta for a long time. She defended Meta in the FTC case, successfully defended antitrust against the FTC. So people are like, do we want to be, why is Apple hiring someone from Meta, which Apple hates, who worked for these Republican administrations, who worked on legislature that was privacy invasive, that Apple would not like, because Apple is usually fighting the government when they ask for information. And Leesa Jackson, everybody loved Leesa Jackson, and she's doing environment stuff. And now they essentially eliminated that position. So now they don't have an environment person. It's just all going to be put those responsibility pushed elsewhere. And we'll talk more about that in overtime. My take on this is general counsel, or the big lawyer at a $1 company like Apple. I should just say trillion. It's a big enough number, and it's actual real.
Correct. Yeah.
It's a real thing. Multi-trillion-dollar company like Apple. I do think that her relevant experience defending giant companies against government action and succeeding overrides any of Apple's concerns about her having worked for Meta or Republican administrations or worked on the Patriot Act. Because if you're looking for the general counsel, the big lawyer at your company, to provide moral clarity, you're probably looking in the wrong place. People hire lawyers because they have experience, knowledge, and win cases. You kind of want, it's like everyone hates everyone else's lawyer, but everyone wants their lawyer to be the biggest jerk in the entire world, because that's true of people, but it's like doubly true of corporations. Like, do you know the issues involved? Can you win these cases? And Apple has plenty of cases where governments are trying to apply regulations on them and fining them and suing them. Like, for however much you might hate Meta or whatever, Apple, I mean, maybe it's just we talk about them so much in the show, like every government in the world is on their case for a lot of legitimate reasons and maybe some less ones or whatever. So I kind of think, if there's one person you're going to hire in your company where you don't really care, like, what kind of other bad things they worked for. I mean, you can say Facebook is, I don't know, like, it should work for like the first Trump administration, but not the second, I think. I don't know. It should work for George W. Bush. It's on the Patriot. Like, I get why people are mad. We would prefer a lawyer who is a wonderful person who, helps small children and the elderly and also wins cases against the government when they sue big companies. But I think this is just the nature of the beast that, for employees that you're hiring, this particular role, the biggest, baddest lawyer in your company, it seems like you would have to sort of look aside of the fact they worked at Meta. Versus, for example, let me hire a new head designer and let me get it from one of Gruber's favorite punching bags, Amazon, which I think in his article he described as a company that has no interest in design whatsoever. Like, if Apple brought in a new head of design and pulled them from Amazon, we'd be saying, why are you pulling a new designer from there? But Apple pulling a new general counsel from Meta, that's my take.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have strong feelings about it. I don't have strong feelings about the lawyer rejiggering. I have somewhat strong feelings about Leesa Jackson retiring. I don't like that we're just kind of letting that role fizzle. I get it.
Yeah, maybe it's like that because there's no one else who can do what she's done. Like, that's such a weird position. I think she was so uniquely suited for it. I don't know. I mean, it is weird and concerning though. And again, we'll talk about this more in overtime, but like, because we're going to talk about Apple and the environment, but that's another thing people are upset about.
Yeah, because wasn't the position created for her? Like, wasn't she the first person?
Yes, exactly. It was basically to get her to work at Apple. You're going to be this new thing. And now when she's leaving, the position is going with her. So we'll see how that turns out.
Yeah, I mean, people are trying to, ascribe it to, in Trump era America, that, where Apple's trying to get rid of environmental stuff. I don't think this says that. And I'd be the first person to, throw Tim Cook under the bus for that kind of thing. But I don't think this means that. But we'll see. Like, what I suspect is that she wanted to retire for whatever her reasons were. You can guess. There's plenty of reasons why somebody who works works on environmental issues in a prominent role in America right now might say, you know what, enough is enough and just retire. But I think there's enough of environmental care built into Apple that, like, I'm not that worried about this indicating anything either way.
Yeah. So, all right, that's not the only news. On December 6th, reading from Mark Gurman, Johnny Srouji, the Senior Vice President of Hardware Technologies and one of Apple's most respected executives, recently told Tim Cook that he is seriously considering leaving in the near future, according to people with knowledge of the matter. Srouji, the architect of Apple's prized in-house chips effort, has informed colleagues that he intends to join another company if he ultimately departs. Cook has been working aggressively to retain him, an effort that included a substantial pay package and the potential of more responsibility down the road. One scenario floated internally by some executives involves elevating him into the role of Chief Technology Officer. But that change would likely require John Ternus to be promoted to CEO, a step the company may not be ready to take. And some people within Apple have said that Srouji would prefer not to work under a different CEO, even with an expanded title. If Srouji does depart, the company would likely tap one of his two top lieutenants to replace him. Then, 2 days later, on December 8th, a new article, Apple chip chief tells staff he's not leaving anytime soon. Johnny Srouji told staff on Monday that he'll stay at the iPhone maker for now. Quote, "I know you've been reading all kinds of rumors and speculations about my future at Apple, and I feel that you need to hear from me directly," he said in a memo to his division. "I love my team and I love my job at Apple, and I don't plan on leaving anytime soon."
That's also Gruber, by the way. So Gurman. Gurman on December 6th says, "Oh, Srouji might be leaving." And then on December 8th, Gurman also then follows up and says, "Never mind. Srouji sent this memo and said that he's not leaving." So good on Gurman for correcting himself quickly. Although, again, I'm not necessarily sure this is a correction because I don't think these stories are contradictory. When you get information like this, it may be about the past. It may be that Tsurugi did express a potential desire lead, and Cook did work aggressively to retain him and succeeded in retaining him. And then when the story breaks, this is all in the past. And Tsurugi writes a memo and says, I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying here. I love you all. Everything's great. Because it is. It's true. Because Tim Cook retained him by convincing him to stay. Tim Cook reportedly convinced Johnny Ive to stay way longer than we all wish he did. And so maybe that's a thing that he's good at, and maybe that's a thing that happened. What I've heard is that everyone's saying, oh, Gurman was the first person to break this Johnny Tsurugi might be leaving story. And I seem to recall seeing it multiple times, probably also from Gurman. So this may have been a thing that was sort of, I think maybe we talked about it on the show, and I was like, oh, if he's going to, oh no, it was in a Slack channel somewhere. I'm sorry. Anyway, it's hard, my online world is mixed together very much these days. The idea was like, oh, Tsurugi might be leaving, but if he left, would he really go to another company, or wouldn't he just retire? Because again, with all these people at a high level at Apple who've been there for years, they're all fabulously wealthy because the salaries are high at that level, and they have Apple stock, and Apple stock has been going up. So all these people can retire easily. And Tsurugi is of the age, you're like, oh, you probably want to retire, right? You got your money, enjoy, you don't have to wait until you're like super duper old to retire. Why would he go work at another company? And as Gruber pointed out in the recent episode of Dithering, where would he go that's more exciting in terms of chip design than Apple? Because Apple is one of the leaders in the kind of chip design that he's doing, unless he wants to do a different kind of chip design that Apple doesn't do. And everyone keeps saying, he's talk about someone who's successful. Part of Apple that's been doing really well is the chip design, and he's the head of that. So he's been knocking it out of the park. Why would he, is he leaving at top? Where would he go where he thinks he's going to top himself? And to that, I would say, yeah, Apple's chip design has absolutely been knocking it out of the park. I think Gruber said, no one would have anything bad to say about his work. And I was like, well, there is one area where the Johnny Tsurugi regime has failed to produce.
Oh, no.
And it was a thing that they were trying to do. When they switched from Intel to Apple Silicon, they had plans to replace all the Intel chips with even better ones made with Apple Silicon. And they did that for every chip except for the ones in the Mac Pro. And they had planned it. There was rumors, there was designs, there was diagrams. They were going to do it, and they've just never, ever, ever done it. Nobody cares about that. I get it. I get nobody cares. And yes, Johnny Tsurugi is a champion of the world, and he's done some amazing things for the chips that actually matter to Apple. So he gets an A+, first place, gold medal. I give it to him, but it is not true to say that there is nothing bad you can say about Johnny Tsurugi's time at Apple. There is one tiny little thing that I personally can say about it.
You are the only human that has anything bad to
but
say.
Here's the thing. They plan to do it, right? It's not just like me on the outside wishing a thing. It's a thing that was on their roadmap, and they just never did it. So it's not like they decided we're not going to do this. They wanted to do it. They tried to do it. They have not been able to do it. So in that way, it is one of those very, very minor sort of internal failures. Kind of like making their own modem chips, which they wanted to do for a long time, and for a long time they failed to do, and they took them a while, but they eventually did do it. It's a thing they wanted to do. I think Apple still potentially wants to do something like this to make a higher power chip or whatever, but again, the rumors were that it's not anywhere on the roadmap until like the M7 or something, which we are rapidly approaching because time passes. So that's why I think it's fair to put a tiny little ding on the otherwise sterling record to say this is a thing you were actually tasked with, that the company wanted to do, that it makes sense for you to want to do because you're transitioning from one set of chips to a new one, and you want to have replacements that are better than all the ones you had before in all possible ways. And this one little area that doesn't even matter, I know, is an area where it failed. But anyway, I would have expected him to retire. Why would you go to another company? Where are you going to go? What have you got left to prove? You could same thing it could be said of Johnny Ive, but some people just want to keep working, right? And so, who knows if that rumor is true? But the rumor was he was going to leave Apple and go somewhere else, and I just can't imagine where he would have gone. But apparently, according to his intended to be leaked memo, he loves everything there. He's staying at Apple. He has no plans to leave, but of course, plans change every day, so we'll keep an eye out.
All right, going back to his December 6th, so the first post, The recent shifts are already reshaping Apple's power structure. More authority is now flowing to a quartet of executives. Ternus serves as chief Eddie Q, software head Craig Federighi, and new COO Sabi Khan. Apple's AI efforts have been redistributed across its leadership, with Federighi becoming the company's de facto AI chief. Ternus is also poised to take a starring role next year in the celebration of Apple's 50th anniversary, further raising his profile. And he's been given more responsibility over robotics and smart glasses, two areas seen as future growth drivers. Further reorganization is likely. Deirdre O'Brien, head of retail and human resources, has been with Apple for more than 35 years, while marketing chief Greg Joswiak has spent 4 decades at the company. Apple has elevated the key lieutenants under both executives, preparing for their eventual retirements.
Yeah, this is kind of the story this week. Continuing executive exodus and reshuffling at Apple, which I agree with what everyone else has said. I don't find this as a concerning thing. As Gruber said, many people are giddy about some of the departures. But it's just an age-based turnover, and it makes sense for them to sort of, kind of all transition around the same time, with Tim Cook being the big departure, which will eventually happen, whenever. People get old. People want to retire. People want to move on. People have been in the company for decades. It's a changing of the guard. And I think it's all good. Like I as I've written about, I think there needs to be turnover both at the top but everybody else underneath them. I think it's healthy for that to happen. It's been great to have the continuity of like the old school Apple folks sort of keeping that culture alive. But we've seen how that can fail in terms of maybe blind spots for newer technologies and not making the right moves on AI, but also at how like those old school people who have been at the company for decades being unable to stop something like Alan Dye ruining the user interface to all their products, right? So like, what is the point of like, oh, it's great. We have these people, we have this continuity of leadership. We have this leadership team that like this page hasn't changed in a real long time. It's very stable. These people have been with the company. They really know the spirit of Apple. The spirit of Apple doesn't do anybody any good unless it manifests in preventing the company from doing things that are clearly against the spirit of Apple. And in many, many ways recently, that has not been happening. So that's when you say, okay, your spirit of Apple, sort of reason for you being in your job for 40 years, that no longer flies. So probably you should retire because you're kind of retirement age and let someone else have a chance. And let's see a changing of the guard. Let's see some Apple turnover. Haha. And it's happening. And even when people like Leesa Jackson leave that everybody loved, like, again, people move on, get old, retire, good luck to them. I'm happy to see a lot of turnover. And, as great as Johnny Cerrugi is, it's, if he left, I don't think it would be the end of the world. I think what's much more concerning are those rumors that we talked about, many months ago about Apple's silicon team under him, those people leaving to go work for other companies. That's way more concerning than the head of that thing. Because I think that organization is very functional. And I think, if he were ever to leave, there are probably people under him who could take over his role. And perhaps his biggest expertise was sort of like, we're going to make all our own chips now, get that effort rolling from zero, from buying PA Semi and like getting him to sort of take all those people and, go to the Apple Silicon era. Keeping that machine running is easier than starting it up from zero. So I wouldn't be as concerned if he left or retired or went somewhere else, but I have been concerned with sort of the rumored brain drain from under him. And the same thing with what Gruber talked about, which again, I'm assuming is sourced, even though he's not like pinpointing the sources or telling you how many people said this, of designers who left Apple to go elsewhere because they didn't like the direction Alan Dye was doing things. Like, we know designers left, like when Johnny Ive left, basically the whole team who was loyal to him left with him and went to work with him at Love From or working with him on the OpenAI stuff or whatever. And a lot of times you can look at that and say, those are just his friends. They wanted to go where he's going. It's fine. But here's Gruber saying another factor in that is they didn't want to stay at Apple with someone leading them who doesn't know what they're doing and is telling them to do things that they disagree with. So that is way more concerning than the people at the top leaving. So I think the people at the top need to rotate, and hopefully new people at the top will be more proactive about preventing bad things from happening in the company. So if John Ternus becomes CEO, he can make a lot of decisions that could change stuff there. If John Ternus was CEO, would he have allowed Alan Dye to fester as long as he did, or would he have done something differently? I'm definitely optimistic about the turnover right now. Again, it can go bad. Things could be worse than they are now instead of better, but it's time for some new folks to have a shot at this.
Yeah, I mean, anytime that you change leadership, a lot of stuff gets shaken up and you are rolling the dice. We don't know pick whatever the theory is. Like, it seems like there's a lot of smoke behind the Ternus fire here. So like, we don't know what kind of CEO John Ternus would be. And we don't know what kind of challenges he would face during his tenure at Apple. Just like, Tim Cook, has had to deal with a lot of conditions and events and dynamics that he probably could not have predicted when he first got on the job, and that Steve Jobs
predicted.
Yeah, exactly. Steve Jobs, when basically recommending Tim Cook for the job, he couldn't have known all the stuff that Tim Cook was going to face either. And so, you're rolling the dice with anybody. And we don't know how it's going to be, but I've said for a long time, like John, I've said that I'm ready for some fresh blood in a lot of these high up ranks for lots of reasons. Not all of them are bad. Some of them are just, generational turnover. Obviously, I'm not a huge fan of Tim Cook by any means. There was that report or that part of the Gurman report that Tim Cook has like an unexplained tremor in his hands, and people have noticed. I wouldn't read too much into that if it's even true.
I don't think his the dexterity of his right hand is essential to his job at CEO. He's not a professional athlete.
Yeah, so I wouldn't read too much into that. If he does have a health problem, I'm not going to take joy in that. But I do want Apple to have new leadership. I don't want it to be that way, but I want Apple to have new leadership. And I'm very much looking forward to what the next generation could do. Because there was a great segment on Upgrade about this, the last two episodes of Upgrade, where especially Jason was going in deep about how when you are rising up the ranks, if there's nowhere for you to go above a certain level, you tend to often just leave to a different company or go do something else because you hit a ceiling, and if the person above you is not going to retire for a long time, then you kind of have nowhere to go. So there is a lot of that mid-level and upper-level talent that shuffles around or departs for a different company, and maybe that's what happened with Alan Dye. It just happened to benefit us. but
and on that front though, it's not just like the person behind you is never going to leave because you'll never get their position. The other part of that is maybe the people above you are never going to promote you. Maybe there's places for you to be promoted to, but the people above you have got a vendetta against you or disagree with you fundamentally about something or whatever, and you feel trapped in the company, not because you need someone to leave so you can take their job up, because they don't like you and won't promote you, so you leave to go else. That's the real danger and brain drain in companies, is not that the super important people on your leadership page leave. It's that the sort of mid-level and low-level people will leave for all the reasons that they leave. And one of those reasons could be there's some bad manager that the manager 2 or 3 levels above should have gotten rid of the company ages ago, but hasn't. For example, someone who has creating a toxic work environment, and higher level executives run cover for them because they're part of the boys club. You know what I mean? That causes hundreds of people, many levels below, to say, maybe I should go look elsewhere. And that leadership is not allowing that to happen. So yes, sometimes it's because you hit the ceiling and you can't get promoted anymore, but sometimes it's because you can't even get promoted from level 1 to level 2 because you have a bad manager above you that you can't get rid of in the company.
Yeah. And so what I'm looking forward to is the shuffling up, because what tends to happen, one thing that Jason mentioned, I believe, on Upgrade this week, that when Tim Cook took over from Steve Jobs, the very first day, he brought back Apple's charitable giving matching program that Steve Jobs just hated that kind of thing and would never allow it. Tim Cook had a list on day one of stuff to change, and it seemed like pretty good stuff. Every time somebody really high up turns over, you have a chance for someone to be elevated into that role who has one of those to-do lists that for whatever reason, the previous leader just wouldn't do it, or you couldn't convince them to do it, and it's the right idea. Sometimes it's not, but a lot of times it is. And so whenever there is this kind of turnover, you get rid of personalities or dynamics or politics that were blocking some good ideas from happening. So it tends to be positive. Now there's also, there's learning curves, there's mistakes that are made along the way, but typically responsibly done turnover, when you have a good bench behind you, typically results in some pretty good stuff happening. There is a lot of smoke behind the fire now of this being, near the end of the Tim Cook era. And when you have a CEO transition in particular, then that tends to cycle out a lot of the people around the CEO and right below the CEO. So anybody who does not get the job, who maybe wanted the job, they're very likely to retire maybe a little bit earlier than planned or quit or leave or whatever. Anybody who doesn't get along with the new dynamic created might get forestalled out of the company. There might be, people who just don't want to work for the new CEO. And like John was saying, how like when Johnny Ive left, a lot of people went with him. When Alan Dye left, some people went with him. Like sometimes you just want to stay with the person you've been working with because you work well together or whatever. So like when the CEO leaves, there tends to be a lot of shifting around of things below them. So I think there's enough smoke to this fire. I think Tim Cook is going to leave soon. And I guess leave in terms of the CEO role in particular. We don't, if he's made chairman of the board or whatever, that's a different story. But like, it does seem like he's going to leave the CEO role in the near future. This sounds very, very likely. There's a lot of smoke now behind this from pretty good sources. So probably he's out soon as CEO for whatever reason. And so I think we're about to see a lot of this turnover. We're already seeing it like in the last few weeks. I think this is a very exciting time for Apple. And, this whole generation now, like look at the leadership page now. How many of them are going to be here in 5 years on that leadership page? The Gruber report is that, the quartet of executives that are gaining power now, Ternus, Eddie Q, Craig Federighi, and Sabi Khan. Well, Craig Federighi is 57. Eddie Q is 61. I don't know how old Sabi Khan is off the top of my head, but like, so even those, like Ternus, I think is about 50. But even of those four people, Eddie Q and Craig Federighi and probably Sabi Khan, all three of those will probably be retired within 10 years, maybe 5. So like, there's a lot of turnover about to happen, and I think it's time. This era of executives has done very well. They've made a lot of great stuff happen. And it's time for the next generation to start filtering in. So I'm looking forward to this. I think this will be exciting. And even if it's a little bit bumpy at times, again, people will make mistakes in their new roles here and there. Even if it's a little bit bumpy, I'm excited for all of those like initial ideas that have been held back for whatever reason to start being implemented. And so some of those changes to start shifting. And I'm not expecting things to change overnight. Again, this is a huge company with huge operations. And just things don't turn on a dime, but progress will be made. And it'll add up over time, and it'll be pretty meaningful, I bet. So I'm very much looking forward to this transition.
I think we also need some young people to cycle back into Apple, which is a thing that happens. Lots of people will go to work for Apple, then they leave Apple, then they come back later. Certainly that happened in like the run up to near bankruptcy in the late 90s. And then people came back once they realized Apple was ascendant again. And that has happened at various times in the Jobs era, this Jobs second era, where they were very successful and people left the company with their stock options. Thinking they sold at the peak and went and did something else, but then they came back at Apple because they realized Apple was still growing and their startup that they went to failed or whatever. The thing about people hanging around for a long time is that it does encourage people to go elsewhere because it seems sort of like the leadership structure is sort of ossified. And like I said, the idea is that those longtime employees are sort of carrying the spirit of Apple forward, that they've been around here for a long time. They really know what makes Apple Apple. And it's important for them to stay with the company because they're keeping that spirit alive. Well, that spirit's only good if it prevents bad things from happening. But if all those people leave, one of the dangers of lots of turnover is now you get a bunch of young people who have no idea what Apple should be, right? Because they've grown up with an Apple that has had deteriorating user interface design, for example. And so they don't see that as a hallmark of Apple's strength. They just think it's like, oh, they have cool, shiny phones or something. And they have no idea about like Apple's traditional strengths in human-centered design, because that's not the Apple that they've seen from the outside or the inside. And so all the old people leave, and you do need some people around who are like, hey, back in the day, we used to carefully design interfaces with these things in mind, and we didn't just wing it. We're not the same as Samsung. Like we have a different ethos. And like, what are you talking about? All phones are the same. We just make shiny ones. We're Apple. It's like, no, there is something deeper. So I hope some people who left Apple in disgust, let's say, cycle back in, because we need people who know what Apple should be, and some of those people are no longer at Apple. So yes, new leadership, new ideas. And again, the new leadership, like Ternus has been with the company a long time. It's not like he's a rando from outside. Like that's why no one is even assuming that Apple's new leader would come from outside the company. But at the sort of, as you go down the org chart, there are lots of people there. I wonder, like, do they know what Apple is supposed to be? If all of the people who have been at Apple for decades leave and just Apple is left for the new people, I think Apple has been doing weird stuff for such a long time that there's probably not a lot of universal agreement about what Apple should be. Again, it seems like there is in our circles because we just talk to other old Apple people, right? But the younger people, right? How do they feel about App Store policy? Do they just accept it as the way things are because that's the way the internet has been their entire life, right? They don't remember an era when people were selling software over the internet, not through the App Store because they weren't alive for that or weren't old enough to use computers when that happened. So there are some concerns about just like let the young people run this, but again, Ternus is 50. He's not young, but he could 50. Becoming CEO at 50 still gives you a lot of runway to do lots of stuff. And then the other folks, like for all we love Phil Schiller and Joswiak. Like I kind of hope those people kind of stay around, continuing to just be the sort of cranky old people who keep the spirit of Apple alive. But who wants to work for new people decades younger than you, right? And I think that was one of the Siri rumors that he didn't want to work under a different CEO. Who knows why he loves Tim Cook so much? I mean, again, they made a good team or whatever, but like when you reach a certain age, it's kind of galling to have some kid come and be your new boss, right? And that makes people retire. So there is some danger in this transition, but I do hope, like if you're out there and you're listening and you used to work at Apple and you know what the heck you're doing, wait for the dust to settle and consider maybe going back to Apple. Not just because you may be able to rise through the ranks, but also because this company might need your help.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about that with this transition because, I mean, the reality is like when you think about like what is Apple? Well, what would the answer to that be in say 2002 or 2004 versus 2007 versus 2008? Like it changes over time. I know to you you're like that's decades after the company started, but like that's when it started to me. So like there's a reason why Steve Jobs said don't do what I would do what's right. Like that sentiment, even though I don't think Tim Cook did a very good job of that, I think that sentiment was right. Apple is a set of core values, but the specifics of how those are implemented and deployed and what the products are, what they're like, what's important to them, how they address markets. The specifics of those shift over time as they have to. It's a tech company. Tech is constantly moving, constantly changing. So Apple has changed over time, even like during whatever period of Apple you view as like the good old days. And you out there, I'm sure we all have different periods of that. But whatever period that is, that period was one of many, and they shifted around, they changed. And even today, even when, I have a lot of problems with some of the decisions that the current administration has made, but I still love most of their products, and I still use most of their products constantly, and they're better than they've ever been in most ways. Yeah, we have nitpicks about software design and stuff, but like most of the products are amazing and have never been better. And so I wouldn't trade my laptop of today for anything that from 6 years ago.
You got Johnny Cerruti to thank for that one.
Yeah.
No, I think the danger is the core values that you're talking about. It's not any specific decision, but one of the core values is user interface design. And it manifests in different ways because user interface design means something different when it's an iPod click wheel versus when it's the original Macintosh user interface versus when it's the iPhone, right? But all those things were informed by those core values. And Apple has held on to a lot of its core values, but when we see, it's kind of like an Inside Out for people who've seen that movie, when those pillars start to crumble, you're like, oh, wait, like, this is not just, oh, you made a bad decision or something or whatever. This is like one of those core value pillars. Like, again, like Apple making a car, that's very different than what Apple used to be, or making a phone for that matter, or anything. Like, it's fine for the company to change and become something different. But the thing that makes Apple, the thing that makes them successful, the thing that makes us attracted to their products are those core values. And that's what you're worried about crumbling. Like, again, with the App Store stuff, I think a lot of the stuff they've done with the App Store is against some of the core values of Apple, although others would argue it is aligned with the core values of Apple, screwing developers. But anyway, like, again, for young people who have grown up in a world with much more powerful corporations having their thumb on every creator, right? That's just normal to them. It's good to have some of the ethos from like the Apple II era or whatever, when the company had a different attitude towards developers. You can argue about has it ever been Apple's core value? When did it change? Which core values do you like? But I think user interface design and attention to detail are two that people would agree with that should be universal through the history of Apple, which manifests in different ways. But when we see those pillars crumbling inside out style, it's when I get a little panicked. And I just want to make sure that whoever is in the new regime understands that their job is to restore those pillars, not to ignore them and pretend they never existed.
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting, and I'll even go so far as to say exciting time to be someone that's intrigued by Apple as a company. As you both have said, I think, getting some new blood up at the top is probably healthy, and maybe it won't be. Maybe everything will take a terrible, terrible turn, and next thing you know, will be the accidental Android podcast. I doubt it, but you never know. But I'm tentatively and cautiously optimistic that 2026 is going to bring a lot of really interesting and really exciting and really positive changes.
Yeah, one of the other reasons I'm optimistic is I look at sort of like, to use a car analogy, the car they've made, like the car they have there, the pieces of the puzzle or whatever, like the ingredients. Pick your metaphor. The stuff that Apple has right now, you look at it from an outside perspective as a tech enthusiast who loves Apple, and you're like, you've got all the pieces here. You can do great things. The only thing stopping you is yourself from making dumb. Like, it's not like in the age where like, oh, I don't know what, they don't have a good operating system story. They don't have a modern operating system, and they don't know what to do with their CPUs, and the PowerPC can't get to the clock speeds that they promised. And, like, all the pieces are there. Like, you're so close. Like, that's why, to Marco's point, all their products are so good now. It's just that they just need to make a couple of decisions differently. It's not as if there's some fundamental problem where it's like, again, like the operating system, where it's like, what is this company going to do? They're still basically a computer company, and everyone else is moving on to have modern operating systems, and they cannot get their act together. That was a really concerning time. Whereas now we see like this amazing vehicle that has been created, the Apple of today, this giant company. It's like, you've got it. Just whatever. Ternus, take the wheel.
All right. Thanks to our sponsors this week, Factor, Leesa, and Aura Frames. And thanks to our members who support us directly. You can join us at atp.fm/join. One of the many perks of ATP membership is Overtime, our weekly bonus topic. Every single episode has bonus content, usually another extra like 15 to 20 minutes or so. And it's one topic extra, and that's called Overtime. This week on Overtime, we'll be talking about how the Apple Watch and Mac Mini are no longer advertised as being carbon neutral. Will Apple really be carbon neutral by 2030 as they had planned? We'll be talking about that in Overtime. Join to listen, atp.fm/join. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.
Now the show is over, they didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research, Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Mastodon, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MarcoArment, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
So I have a software problem that, like, it's kind of like Marco's problem with tethering. It's like, what are you going to do about it? It's not the type of thing. I mean, I guess someone can write in and tell me what I can do about it, but it's this. Messages, which I use to communicate with my family, has done a thing that I've heard other people talk about, and I got to ignore them when it wasn't happening to me, but now it's happened to me. For example, I have a group message thread, whatever, a message group that's me, my wife, and my daughter, where she talks to her two parents about stuff that she needs us to do for her while she's at college mostly, or asks for pictures of the dog or whatever. That's the group. Me, my wife, and my daughter. The group has existed, I don't know, since she got an iPhone, basically, where the three of us talk about stuff. Recently, the Apple has added the features where you can put like a background image on it, and you've always been able to name the group, and so she has fun renaming it. Anyway, it's a group. And then I think maybe about a month ago, my wife was complaining that now she has two message threads that are me, her, and my daughter. And they look identical. And sometimes when she sends a message, it goes into one group, and sometimes it goes into the other one. And I'm like, oh, that's crappy. She's like, how do I fix this? I said, I don't know. And then it happened to me. Now I have 2 message groups with these 3 people in them that have the same name and the same stuff or whatever, but they are separate. And so every time I want to send a message, I got to make sure I'm sending a message to the group that has most recently had activity in it and not the other one, which hasn't, which means that if I'm ever in another app and I want to share a message thread, since the groups are named the same, like I don't know which one is the one that's had activity. Now, if you look at the groups, I look at them and I think, okay, from a computer person perspective, I kind of see this one, if I look at who's in the group, it shows Apple IDs and the other one shows phone numbers, right?
That's the problem.
Right. But here's the thing.
Nailed it.
Here's the thing. In the Contacts app,
I know, it doesn't matter.
those phone numbers and Apple IDs are associated with the same person. What is the function of the Contacts database if not to let you know that all of these things refer to this one person? Therefore, if there is a message thread with those 3 people, it shouldn't matter if it's a phone number, an Apple ID, a phone number, Apple ID, Apple ID, Apple ID. And the second question is, how did this ever happen? Because it's not like we intentionally made a new group with those 3 people in it. And I know we didn't make a new group because if we did, we wouldn't have made all of the attributes of the group exactly match the old one, but they do. So it's like the group splintered at some point when we were all away from Wi-Fi or something and we could only use our phone numbers and now it's bifurcated. Why doesn't Messages merge them? Why can't I force Messages to merge them? This seems like just Messages not working. My mental model of how Messages should work and how the Contacts database should function is obviously not the actual model, and it's maddening. And I'm sure there's some reason they do this with phone numbers and SMS and whatever, but we're all on iPhones. It's all blue bubbles. It seems to me that at least there should be an option or a preference somewhere that says, look, just when you're recruiting groups of people, it's that person, whether it's coming from their Apple ID, their phone number, or whatever the hell other information is in there. Back in the day, their AIM address or whatever. It's that person. That's why all those things are in their contact card. So I'm very frustrated by it. If anyone knows the solution to this that does not involve deleting one of the conversations, which is, we don't want to do because now there's history in both of them, I would just love for them to be merged or to appear in one place, but I think that's not possible.
I wonder if it has to do with okay, so if you have a contact card that has somebody's name or has somebody's Apple ID and phone number on the same contact, but if someone else in the conversation has a different combination, if they have just the name and not the Apple ID,
maybe, but that's not the case.
Could that? No, but I'm saying so maybe the system is designed to be this strict because if it wasn't, it could introduce weird either disclosures of private data accidentally, or it could have this weird fractional thing of what if the different people in the conversation have different spotty contacts for each other, maybe that could create some kind of weird condition that would break in some way or would leak data.
I feel like if that's the case where you have different contact info on different sides, that is the case when you're talking, not with my family, but with strangers, where someone on one person's phone, they show up with their face and their contact info, on your phone, they just show up as a phone number because you don't have any contact info on them. But it's still the same conversation. Your view into it is different because you don't have that person's contact information. All you know is their own phone number, whereas the 2 other participants have contact information. The same way we see different pictures for our contacts, because my daughter has a different picture for me than my wife has for me. Right. So they see different me's in the conversation, but it's still me.
Yeah, I don't know.
It seems like either way, it seems like there should be a way to merge the conversations. I should be able to drag them on top of each other or select them both and say, please merge these for the purposes of history or whatever, in the case where all 3 of us have all the contact info and all the, we all have our own Apple IDs and our phone numbers and they're all in all of our contacts. I have made sure of that.
I would also suggest a killer feature that I wish iMessage had, and maybe they can add this. I often will get added to group conversations where there's some random phone number in it that I don't know. It's a bad experience for all around if there's some rando in a conversation that you don't have their contact, and then you have to message oh hey who's number 1234 at the end, who is this? I don't have your contact. It's clumsy and annoying when you're trying to form groups. So what I would love to see is some feature that addresses that. Maybe the way to do it is when you are in a group conversation, if you send a message to the group and anyone else in the group doesn't have your contact, maybe iMessage prompts you to share your contact with the people who don't have it. Or
I think it already does that.
Yeah, that does happen.
For your image, but only for your image, right?
Image and name, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, me. Okay, so maybe this is already covered.
In the gaming world, they do it kind of the reverse, where it's like, you can offer to share your real name with people or not, and people can make a request for you, or they want to see your real name, or they want to become close friends instead of just friends. But like in the game world, it's very much like standoffish, where nothing happens unless there's a two-way handshake about an agreement that you want to share this information, which does make it a little bit annoying, but it's very cautious. I think Apple is less cautious, like offering to share images and stuff, especially since people just tap through that stuff. Like it pops up, you're like, yeah, whatever. They don't even know what they're doing. They don't know they're sending their image to other people or whatever. But again, I've just like, whatever the policy is, fine. You know, you've got this policy that's very protective or whatever. There should be a way to manually, you know, to your point, like just like you said, Marco, the way this manifests is who is blah, 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 blah. Now you're reading someone's phone number out, which maybe, you know, I guarantee everyone could look up because they're in the same group chat, but a lot of people won't know. It would be much better if there was a verb that people could use, like, let's all share our info. Like some kind of verb that everyone knew how to do in messages, where you just press one button and say, yes, I've agreed to share all my info with everybody. If there was a word behind that, if there was an action, if there was a proper noun, if there was something, if there was some kind of vocabulary to talk about this, instead of individually having to say, who is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Who's this number? Who's that number? I don't have your this. You don't have
right.
this.
That's what I'm saying.
Just,
like messages should basically prompt the people whose numbers are not known to someone to say, hey, this person in the group doesn't have your contact. Do you want to, you know, reveal yourself or something?
But even that is like onesie twosie. Like you could just have someone in the group says, we should all super share, and there'd be a super share button, and we push super share, and everyone in the group gets everyone else's info, and like everyone has to turn your key, sir, and they all have to put super share. But once everybody presses super share, everybody gets shared with everybody else, right? As opposed to going onesie twosie to individual people and sending contacts and doing all that stuff. Because believe me, like we know how to send a contact card to somebody. I send contact cards to my family all the time, and they just stare at it in their messages. They have no idea. Like, am I supposed to do something with this? Like, yes, you are supposed to do something with it. I'm sending you the entire contact information. You just have to tap it. You just have to do literally anything with it, and it will open in contacts. And then maybe it'll ask you if you want to merge with the existing account, but they just look at it and be like, did that do something? Like, no, you gotta, at least on the Mac, you have to do stuff with it. Maybe iOS, it automatically adds it. But anyway.
No, I don't think it ever automatically adds it.
This seems like it should be better. And you know, Apple has made some progress here with the photo sharing stuff or whatever. Although that mostly all I've heard from my family with the photo sharing is their annoyance, because they all want their, like my daughter has I don't think it's AI generated, but I forget, some picture of me. It's like, I think it's a picture of me from middle school, but then someone has added like a handlebar mustache and a beard or a goatee.
We need to see this picture.
We need to see this immediately.
I think you've seen it before. I think I've showed it to you. But anyway, she insists on keeping that as her contact picture for me. But of course, Apple, being helpful, is constantly offering my
Right.
picture to her. And she's like, no, stop offering it. I'm like, I'm not offering it to you. Like iOS or whatever. Like, I'm not pressing a button to make that happen. It's just unavoidable. And same thing on my side. I have my own pictures of a lot of my contacts. And then people are constantly sending, like, I think like a Gruber's contact that he's always offering is like the Daring Fireball logo, but I've got an actual picture of him. Or no, he's got like a cartoon face or whatever. I'm like, no, I don't want the cartoon. I don't want your corporate logo. I want this picture I took of you. And so I have to constantly fend off that thing. And if I accidentally tap it or click the wrong thing one day, that's why I saved a little folder of like, here are the contact pictures that I want for these people. And even if somehow your finger slips and it gets overwritten by the thing that they want, tough luck. I want this person to look like that. And that is a little bit of a battle. So there's, you know, the system could be improved in many respects.
Yeah, I feel like setting custom contact pictures for people you know is one of life's great pleasures, and they should not be interfering more than necessary with that. And it is funny too, like whenever I get like the, you know, this update this person's photo from them, ? People who work for Apple are always memojis.
Yes.
And no one else ever is.
I've noticed this.
They're like, I've never had anyone who didn't work at Apple have a memoji as their avatar.
I have had that. I have had regular people use memojis, but I swear to you, I don't know if it was an edict or what, but I have noticed this as well. I don't know a whole bunch of people that work at Apple, but golly, I don't think it's 100% for me, but it's darn near 100%.
Maybe it was like
memoji.
fun to like use it like when it was first being developed and you were like inside Apple, but when it like essentially went wide inside Apple, or especially if you were in the people who got to see it ahead of time. But like, as I've complained about memojis before, they are the opposite of a likeness, because every memoji's head is shaped the same. And that's not true of people. That's why emojis never look like the person, because like a caricature that you get at a carnival or any kind of cartoon thing will emphasize the things that make you look like you. And emojis never do that. Mii's on like the Nintendo Wii would let you make a long skinny head. If you got a long skinny head, make a short one, make a big nose, make a small nose, but emojis, everybody is a spherical, generic thing. And they look, I mean, other than the fact that you can say, oh, I guess that person has brown hair and so does your emoji. And I guess their glasses look like yours. They never look like the people, which is fine. If you don't want it to be a likeness, you just want it to be like a generic avatar. But like, why not just, I don't know. I'm not a fan of emoji. I don't think they serve a purpose, because if I see them, to your point about talking with Apple people, if I see an emoji and like as an icon, I have no idea who that person is. Like even if they use the same emoji all the time, they just all look the same. They all look generic, and I can't recognize people based on an emoji.
It's one of the indicators if somebody does work at Apple. Like in the same way, like when you go to somebody's like Mastodon profile, there would be like a couple of indicators sometimes, like like people who live in as their location in Mastodon, they put like some suburb near Cupertino or something, and they don't say their company, or they'll say like fruit company, or so, there'll be like all these like kind of coded things that indicate, yeah, you work for Apple, you just don't want to get in trouble, like that kind of thing. And the emoji is definitely a tell. Now, also, while we are working on the contacts database in our fantasy here, archived contacts, please make a concept of archived contacts where you can put people who you don't want to contact without some kind of warning, or you don't want to show up in searches, or things like estranged family members, ex-partners, people who have died. You don't want to like delete their contact because you might someday want it again, or in the case of somebody who has died, like you don't want all the past messages with that person to just be like unassociated with a name anymore. But have a concept of an archived contact, because think about what this can do. First of all, people who have like, a name conflict where like your spouse is named Bob, and you have, a Bob in your contacts that you talk to once every 5 years, and Siri will often offer you that one instead of your spouse, even though like so many of these things could be resolved. Like, let me archive a whole bunch of contacts that I don't need in frequent day-to-day or present-day use, but I don't want to delete because I might someday need them, or I don't want to lose association.
Yeah, I actually want this. I've always wanted this within a single contact. I've been battling with this for the entire time I've had contacts, even back in like the Claris email and Entourage days. Within a contact, often my contact, but often other people's. I have a massive history of email addresses. Most of them don't exist or work for me anymore. But why would I want to keep them in my contact? Because like you said, when there's any kind of thing in the world, like an email or a message thread or whatever, I want to know that it was from me back when I worked at company XYZ, because it's associated with that email address, which I don't want to be in my contact or ever in any autocomplete or whatever. But when someone sees me at somecompany.com, that company long since has gone under and that domain name is gone, but there's some email and some email archive that I'm browsing, or some message thread and something that I'm looking at, I still want it to know that was me. But I do not want that email address to be anywhere. And I wish within a contact I could say, yeah, I used to have these email addresses. Same thing with addresses in some respects. I used to live with these addresses, but I don't anymore. But anyway.
But yeah, please, at least an archive contact. Like people who like you don't want to show up in Siri. You don't want to like, because like so often you are like you do something in the OS, like you do a spotlight search, and so often you're like, one tap would call this person right now. And it's the last thing. It's like a minefield. And sometimes you accidentally do. You're like, oh my God, I just called this person I haven't worked with in 8 years.
Yeah, like the autocomplete when sending an email, you don't notice it tab completes to the wrong thing. And you send the email to exactly the wrong person. Or like you said, my grandfather, my deceased grandfather, and my nephew have exactly the same first and last name. That is difficult. It's difficult for example, in photos. That's a really difficult one because like, in photos, I do want to identify old pictures of my grandfather and new pictures of my nephew, and they have the same name. And yeah, you can get cute with like giving them nicknames and stuff like that or whatever. But like, if one of those contacts was archived, when they come in the pop-up, the archive one could be like grayed out or a little skull and crossbones next to it. I don't know, like
wow,
whatever you want to do. But it's like seriously, like my long dead grandfather and my just entering high school nephew. There shouldn't be as much confusion in life as there is just because they have the same name.
Yeah, or just like an ex-girlfriend or something, or like you don't want to like accidentally call certain people or text certain, and like, yes, you mentioned autocomplete with email. What about autocomplete in message threads? That's another one where it's like, as you're just typing in names, send this to, Casey and John. Well, what if there was some other, Casey in my past I really didn't want to talk to, because he was really bad at Transport Tycoon back in the day or something.
I'm right here, Marco. I'm right here.
What if there were other people named John? Can you imagine that?
Right.
No. I'm sure you never have this problem.
No, I completely agree with both of you. I have had occurrences and occasions where I've wanted exactly what each of you describes. So yes, you have my vote. This might be the thing. One of the three of us, people always ask us, if you could be Craig Federighi for a day, what would you go and force everyone to do and then quit right after? This might be it for
Archive
me.
contacts is a pretty... Okay, also, look, Apple, hey, take this as a little suggestion. If Gurman's right that you're looking for like a Snow Leopard kind of bug fixing kind of release, and I know all the problems with that reference that Snow Leopard actually did have new features, but whatever. Anyway, if you're looking for a kind of a quality assurance, low excitement kind of release, and you need some features to jazz people up about it, Archive Contacts is such a good feature that it's not a ton of work. I know there's a lot of places where contacts show up and you'd have to account for this, but so it's not no work. It isn't like an afternoon.
I was going to say it is kind of actually a fairly heavyweight feature because it gets its tendrils into everything, but they just added password history to passwords, so we know they can do it.
Yeah, like it's not a small lift, but it's not a big lift. It's not like a major tentpole thing, but it's one of those little like quality of life features that would breeze by in the WWDC keynote, and you get a huge applause because that solves problems people actually have. It's like, no, I don't want to call the weird uncle I haven't spoken to in 10 years, or my ex who, if I call them, that could bring up some weird feelings, or this person who died 10 years ago. Like, no, I don't want to call these people with one tap accidentally, or I don't want to accidentally add them to a message thread, but I don't want to, delete the contact either. Like, so it's such a big, high value win if you can get it.
I feel like fixing the messaging merging thing is much more targeted and easier to do. So if someone's wanting to join Apple and fix one bug, do the message merging thing. You can get in and out faster.
I bet mine's easier.
No, because you just got to do you only have to work on the Messages app code base to implement my thing. Your thing, you got to work on a million apps.
No, honestly, I don't think you do.
You know, but like all the pop-up contact autocomplete things now have to understand the concept of an archive contact and have to display it differently.
No, I think by default, anything that's archived doesn't show up through that API.
But you can't have that because Photos needs to show dead people, right? You need to identify dead people in Photos, so Photos needs to. So at the very least, you got to do the integration with Photos. Like yours is a bigger lift. It's definitely bigger.
No, I don't think so. You're talking about merging iMessage threads? No way. That's crazy.
Well, how about just not letting them bifurcate ever? You're just going forward. I'll take that. You don't have to fix the damage done in the past. Just going forward, when people are talking in a conversation, look up which contact is associated with that thing and say, "Here, this is." It's so frustrating. Like, what is the point of having a contact with lots of different information if it doesn't treat all that information as corresponding to that contact? It's like it's only a one-way relationship. It's like one to many and then many to many in the other direction.
I mean, you're not wrong, but as soon as you said, "Oh, my, group chats have split," that is almost certainly. I mean, you nailed the problem. That some of the chats are with emails, some are with phone numbers, some are a mixture of both. And I agree with you. It's infuriating that we have the technology to fix this problem. I don't know why it's not already fixed.
Yeah, and the other thing is the interface of there is so little visibility and awareness of people who initiate conversations. Are you initiating it with a phone number or an Apple ID? Almost nowhere do they make that super duper clear. People don't even know that they can set it. You can set the default. By default, start conversations with this, but the default can be different on different platforms because they just see a name in an autocomplete. It's the thing that infuriates me about FaceTime on Apple TV, which I used to talk to my family, on the actual Apple TV, and I use continuity camera with my phone. FaceTime on Apple TV, it's like start a conversation with, and then you'll tap on a contact, and it'll be like my dad's name, and it'll say underneath it, home, mobile, home. Which one of those is a phone number? Which one of those is an Apple ID?
Who knows?
They don't tell you because there's no room on my 65-inch screen to indicate which one is a phone number, which was an Apple ID. And the consequences of getting it wrong is they get rung on their iPad when they were trying to use their phone, or they're not near their iPad, or they're not on Wi-Fi, or
But they got out of the way of your content, John.
Yeah, there's no room for any word except for home and mobile. Good luck.